let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first item of December 17th, 2020. 2019. Right, okay, December 17th, 2019. Is that accurate?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Chair votes aye, 5-0-0. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of January 14th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, 5-0-0.
I just want to say the secretary did a phenomenal job on the minutes.
And I just want to say she always does.
Okay, is there anyone here tonight for public participation regarding something that is not on the agenda for tonight? Okay. So now we have a report from Bridget Conceição, who is here for tonight as our student rep. Thank you for coming.
No problem. So last week we went on Job Shadow Day. I mentioned it at the last meeting, and I went to Memorial Elementary School, and it was a lot of fun because I was in a kindergarten classroom. And I heard a lot of positive feedback and comments throughout the school because it's a fun experience for everyone. And Student Council is having our annual Senior Citizens Dance March 29th. It's a Sunday afternoon from 12 to 3, and we're getting donations and raffles for some food and like decorations. And the senior citizens sign up, and they always love it because we have music and stuff. And today after school, the equity committee met, and we talked about and reviewed the survey questions, possible survey questions for the survey on to go to all the Burlington public schools. And we said March or April at some
Yep,
point.
it'd
for
be
that?
6 through 12.
Yeah,
For equity
okay.
and inclusion survey for students in 6 through 12.
Perfect. And also some high schoolers on this committee are going to go to each elementary school and have discussions with groups of teachers about equity and education through the Burlington public school system. So that will be interesting. Yep,
Good,
that's it.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
How many more Just, weeks?
I don't know. I haven't counted yet.
good.
I'm not sure.
Is that Dr.
I think
Conti?
actually 7 or 8. We're close.
Yes.
Just wondering, Madam Chair, if Dr. Conti's father is going to give lessons at the senior dance?
Ah.
We'll see if he ever returns.
All right.
May I add one thing?
Yes, Mr. Larkin.
So the Winter Guard hosted a NESBO competition this past weekend, and they performed their Me, I think was Frank Sinatra, or I may have the title wrong. It's a little before my time, but I like the song. But anyway, they came in first in the competition, so I just wanted to give them credit. It was a great, I saw the performance, it was awesome. And if you're on the district Facebook page, you can see it as well.
Great. Thank you. So, are there other, I mean, that was an are there other announcements? We'll skip down to announcements if people have any other announcements tonight. Do we have any other championships since last meeting, Dr. Conti?
I don't think we've had any championships since last meeting.
Okay.
We will do a report on our championships later. We had a visit today. I'm just looking at the agenda. I don't think it's through. We had the Innovative Pathways visit. So the Department of Ed came out. As you know, Burlington was one of 14 high schools awarded an Innovation Pathways grant this year. I think there are only 21 high schools in the state currently that have active innovative pathways. Our innovation pathways in computer science. So the Associate Commissioner, Cliff Chuang, came out, several other folks from the department, and I think we had, Patrick, what, eight other districts here?
We had Danvers, Lowell, Great Barrington, Somerset, Mashpee, Brockton, and Dudley Charlton.
And they learned about our innovative pathway and then visited our computer science classes. So it was a It's a good day. I just want to make sure I thank the Burlington staff, Shireen Terrell especially. She's the one who was the champion of the grant. We have a bunch of others. Deb Deacon, right, was there. We had Leroy Wong. We had
Joe Adebato,
Mhm.
Kerry Lamprey, Gloria Watazik, Krista Anderson, the business department, and Katie Whitcomb.
Folks, and it's just great to see people from other districts here and us collaborating. So again, our Innovative Pathways program is great. We even had a couple engineers from MITRE come out for the presentation because of the flipped internships that we're doing with a lot of the tech companies that are in our area. So.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements tonight? Okay, so are there any subcommittee reports tonight? Okay, all right. And Ways and Means, do you have any updates for us? We're sort of at, yeah, nope.
March 5th will probably be our first subcommittee meeting, and then we'll take it from there, seeing how things go.
All right, thank you. All right. So our first substantial topic here tonight is under Instruction and Technologies is Mr. Matt Jackling is here to help report on the Youth Risk Behavior Survey results. It was done at the high school and at the middle school level last year, and I know a lot of time has been put into it by Mr. Jackling and also by other staff people on subcommittees. I want to thank everybody for how much time they put into looking into this. So thank you for coming tonight.
All right, good evening. How's everybody?
Good evening.
Great. I just want to, before we get going into this, one of the things that, here we go, just looking into some of what we've accomplished in our past year, I just wanted to thank school committee and the town for supporting the warrant article that allowed us to get our new Project Adventure course, which, you know, we have a picture of it slowly coming up here. All right, and with that, our new Project Adventure course finished in September. Should be coming up here soon. Sorry. The course, we were able to bring existing juniors out on it in the fall, but the Project Adventure course itself, the instructional course, part of our curriculum, actually takes place during. Oh boy, that's not what it looks like. It'll be interesting. Either way, the course itself, in terms of our curriculum, doesn't take place until the spring. So our students right now, our 10th graders, are working on getting trained on the safety protocols, and then they'll be outside hopefully within the month. And that's 12 grade 10 student classes that are out there from probably March through the end of the year. The juniors that we brought out were very appreciative. They loved it. And we are having a follow-up on our PD day, which is March 9th. Just Project Adventures coming to us. Originally, they were supposed to come out in the fall, but because of some delays that they had on their end, we didn't have the course constructed by then. So now they're coming out just to take us through one last time, and we're inviting our faculty and staff to come out during that, which is always going to be entertaining. Hopefully, Mr. Connie joins us. Thank you. Mr. Sullivan did say he would be the first one up there. I'll believe it when I see it. When that happens. So either way, thank you very much. Much better. There we go. We did have, yeah, it was a beautiful day. We finally got it up and running, like I said, at the end of September. We did have a fair amount of juniors come out, and the feedback on it was all positive and very appreciative. So again, thank you to this committee, and thank you for the town for supporting it. So getting into the YRBS, this year we actually have reports on the high school and the middle school. So we're going to be getting into both. And as we do, feel free to ask questions as we work our way through it. We are going to spend a fair amount of time just kind of talking about our mental health resources and what we're doing with that currently, and again, under recommendations, kind of what we hope to do moving forward. And the presentation does go into specific questions that we drew out from the YRBS that are more aligned with what we've done in the past, and also some things that, you know, I don't want to use the term red flag, but just things that stood out to us as being things that we need to be more aware of, and things moving forward that we need to start to track data on a little more closely. So again, the YRBS has been conducted over the past decade now, and we've been able to collect data, and it's really been a useful tool. One of the things that we've really tried to do is to kind of put all this data in the same spot. So one of the efforts in preparing for this came down to creating an Excel spreadsheet where we had every question, previous YRBSs, so that now we can have all the data in one location. Because in the past, as I'm sure you know, looking backwards into any kind of records, you get lost in the paper. And so now we've streamlined that. So as we move forward, we'll be adding future YRBS and actually future surveys, future any kind of results that we want to this kind of home base for it, which will give us kind of one resource to access when we're going through any kind of survey data, which even through this process was extremely helpful. So the 2019 Middlesex League Youth Risk Behavior Survey was heavily supported financially by Leahy Health, so we also want to thank them. They have financially supported this since its inception of the ML12, working together to do this. They've consistently demonstrated that they're an exceptional community partner and providing the funding for this up to this point and into the future, so we just want to thank them. Also, JSI is a public health management consulting organization that helps with the data collection and the development of the online version of this, which we've used now in the past 2 YRBSs, which has made the process so much easier in terms of executing. In the past, it's a paper and pencil, it's more time consuming, getting the data back took much longer, and now we're getting the results in a much quicker fashion, but also the disruptance that it causes at both the high school and the middle school is pretty minimal. Normally it takes about an hour, whereas before we were taking half of days to be able to implement. So credit to them for putting it together in a much more feasible way to work into our schedules. All the districts in the Middlesex League outside of Lexington participated in this. So when we go through, you'll see a few different numbers. The first number will be our school. Then there'll be the ML number, which is for the Middlesex League. And that is the conglomerate of every school except for Lexington. Lexington doesn't participate, and when I spoke to their coordinator for health and PE, they've been doing a survey for probably 20 to 30 years where they've been collecting data, and they really had a hard time kind of moving on from that. You know, it's such a depth of information that they just didn't want to abandon. But in the future, they have talked about possibly doing both. But that's, unfortunately, it's their call. But, you know, we would like to include everybody, but every other school participated this year. Just to give you some numbers about where we were, in Burlington, we had roughly around 200 kids at each grade level participating, a little less in grade 6, and then throughout 7 through 12, we had around 200. Totally, we had 594 students at MSMS and 791 students at Burlington High School participating. And underneath there, that's our total, so roughly under 17,000 students participated in this in total. You know, so the data size being that hefty definitely helps us with gaining perspective.
So Matt, just
Yes.
a clarification, and if you're going to get this, I apologize. There are different sets of questions for 6, 7, and 8, and 9 through 12. So I think at one point someone had sort of shared the questions on Facebook, which we didn't really support, but I think we thought some of the participation in middle school suffered because there was a misunderstanding of the questions that we were asking. So.
And looking at the 2 surveys, I understand.
Yeah.
There's some very drastic questions being asked at that level. Additionally, this is the first year that the 6th grade participated. In the past, it had been 7th and 8th grade. So the sample size at the middle school has also grown. Also, when we're thinking about numbers, it's just something to keep in mind that now that 6th graders are participating, 6th graders also tend to be the least involved in some of these risky behaviors. So that just is something to keep in mind as we look at the percentages. So we're going to focus on Burlington High School first. And we'll just go through their numbers, recommendations that align specifically to them, and then we'll work through the middle school. The middle school survey, you know, due to the age of the students taking it, is a little less in-depth in terms of some of the risky behaviors, which makes sense when we get to it. And also the history of data that we have for them is more limited too, just because this is now really our second full implementation of this middle school survey. We've done it in the past, just not as consistently and with the same tool. So for Burlington, we're at 791 students, and with that equates to roughly, like we think of 1% as being a small number, but 1% is roughly 8 kids. So when we're looking at our percentage points, just keep that in mind when we think about it in terms of the amount of kids that we have. That does change the perspective of it. So as we move forward, these are different categories as usual: unintentional injuries and violence, mental health, smoking and tobacco use, alcohol and other drug use, sexual behaviors and HIV, and then unhealthy dietary behaviors and physical inactivity. The YRBS breaks it up into these different components. They do their best to separate that data. One of the things that we've given feedback to JSI has been how they're describing some of the content areas. It's just, when you ask about depression, kids can interpret and how some of the questions are put together. They've been open-minded about a lot of that feedback, which is great, but they are also creating a survey that is supposed to be uniform for all 11 districts that are participating. So there is kind of a give and take with that. Okay. First thing that we're into is unintentional injuries and violence, which are defined as accidental injuries where the harmful outcome was not sought, occurred in a short period of time, or normal body functions were blocked by external means. According to the CDC, in 2017, the U.S. saw 40.6% of deaths among persons aged 10 to 24 were due to unintentional injury. So it's the leading cause of death for this age group. As we get into this, a lot of it does have to do with being in cars, with choices with who you're getting in cars with, which when we're talking about accidental death, that probably is the highest correlation. All right. Youth violence is defined as violence either against or committed by a child or adolescent. And again, according to the CDC, in that age, amongst people aged 10 to 24, 19.2% of deaths were due to suicide, while 14.4% of deaths were due to homicide. Additionally, 1 in 5 high school students reported being bullied in 2018, with 15% of high schools and 22% of middle school reported frequent bullying. We've also asked JSI to clarify what they're talking about with bullying, just in terms of giving an example in those questions, because bullying has become such a broad term. We want to make sure that our question, the data we're getting back reflects what the question intends. So what we did is we went through and we took a few questions out of each section. In total, I believe there was around 100 questions for the high school version and around 70 questions for the middle school. We went through and just highlighted specific questions that we thought were, again, of note. If there's a yellow number, that number is higher than the Middlesex League average. What that means is up for us to talk about and interpret, but that's just how we're kind of denoting it here. So the first question, they rode with a driver who had been drinking alcohol in a car or other vehicle 1 or more times during the 30 days before the survey. Most of the questions are framed within the 30 days before the survey where they're talking about frequency. There are a few that talk about ever, and it's denoted in the question itself. So here, 12.1%, which is again higher than the Middlesex League, but lower than Massachusetts, the state, and our previous 2 numbers in 2017 and 2016. We do have data that goes back to 2012. Again, though, the phrasing of the questions has changed dramatically, so I have a real tough time kind of correlating a 1-to-1 ratio with what they're asking versus what they're asking now. But that data is in the spreadsheet that we created. The next question, drove when they had been drinking alcohol in a car or other vehicle 1 or more times during 30 days prior. For BHS, that was 3.3%, and again, lower than the Middlesex League, and pretty much universally then lower than most of the national Massachusetts averages. A little higher than what we were in 2017, but lower than 2016. As I'm going through this, any questions, feel free to jump in. I do not just want it to be number, but we will definitely, again, feel free to ask. Next one, drove when they had been using marijuana 1 or more times during the 30 days before, 15.3% in Burlington High School, which is higher than the 13.6 from the Middlesex League and higher than previous iterations. This number in discussing this number, you'll see as we go forward, the trends on marijuana use have changed. The legality of it in the state and also perceptions of it have changed dramatically because of that. And so you'll see there's been an increase in most marijuana-related questions. I think it is telling, with our student perceptions and also just our cultural perception of the risk involved with marijuana use has been changed just solely because of the law change. And I think that's telling with some of this information. So next questions, and this is something that's going to kind of be foreshadowed as we go into some of these other violence-related questions. As we were reviewing this, we found this to be really surprising. Some of the numbers regarding violence were a lot higher than what they've been in the past, and we were really questioning the reporting of it. So as we move forward, I'll cover these, and then we'll talk about kind of what we're going to look at as we move into recommendations. We're threatened or injured with a weapon on school property, 5.2%. Compared to the Middlesex League average of 3.9%. Again, higher than in 2017, 2016. We're in a physical fight 1 or more times during the 12 months before the survey, 15.7% compared to 14.3%. And again, looking at US, we're much lower than that, but compared to 2017, up substantially. We're in a physical fight on school property. For BHS, it was 4.7% compared to 4.5% of the Middlesex League. And then some regarding experienced sexual dating violence, 5.3% compared to 4.8% for Middlesex League. And again, a steady trend if you look back to 2017 of going up. And then we're bullied on school property during the 12 months before the survey, 14.9%, which is higher than Middlesex League, right around the Massachusetts and lower than the United States average. Last one was electronically bullied, through one of the social media variations, and that was 13%, up from 11.8 from the Middlesex League, right around the Massachusetts and state average. The thing that we really struggled with in regards to the violence and the violence-related questions was we're not seeing it in terms of how it's reported from students, how it's reported administratively. So one of the things that we're hoping to really focus on through our recommendations is doing a lot more education on being a bystander, because if this is happening at the reported rates that are showing up in the data, then there's a gap between what's happening and what's kind of being passed on to teachers, passed on to adults in the building, passed on to administration. Because we could go through and count the amount of, if we look at, we're in a physical fight on school property, 4.5%, they're saying 40 fights happened per, in the past 12 months, which administratively we see less than 5. So whether this is happening in smaller areas where we're unaware of, that's what we're looking into and trying to figure out if these numbers accurately reflect what's going on in the school. But based on kind of what gets brought to us as teachers, as administrators, we feel these numbers are kind of out of whack. We were really taken aback by this. So we are looking at these processes about how we are notified of this, what we can do to be a little bit more proactive about it. So moving on into mental health. Mental health disorders impact 1 in 5 children ages 13 to 18 in the U.S. In 2017, nearly a third of high school students reported feeling sad or hopeless every day for 2 or more weeks in a row, inhibiting them from performing usual activities. That definition, feeling sad or hopeless every day for 2 or more weeks, is kind of the layman's version of depression. I'm very grateful that they don't use that term throughout, because depression is a word that so many kids interpret in their own unique way. And so I feel like that may not accurately reflect what the question is trying to ask. And so by defining it this way, and they do this in a few different questions, it gives a specific reference point for what they consider is a main symptom of what depression is. So looking into what we're hoping to get out of this. So the first question is, felt like they were under overwhelming stress during the past 12 months, and that's 81%, all right, which if you ask a high school student, that's right. All right. I feel our high school students are at a high stress level, whether that's their own coping mechanisms, whether that's workload, whether that's inability to create, positive outlets for stress. What we did find to be helpful was the next question asked, have a healthy activity or behavior that helps you relieve stress, which was 83%. And so even though we do have a high number of students that are in this kind of at a high level of stress, overwhelming stress as it's phrased, the majority of those kids do feel like they have an outlet for it. As we get into some of the more extreme mental health questions, wanted to do something to purposely hurt themselves without wanting to die, such as cutting or burning yourself on purpose, so self-harm, 12.6%, and in the Middlesex League, 13.6%. So where we see these blacked out areas is if they phrase the question differently. Again, I didn't feel comfortable comparing apples to oranges, because those words matter greatly for how a student interprets this. So we do have previous data that's similar, but again, it's not identical. And so if we're going to continue to use this, which I feel we are, we want to make sure that we're keeping everything aligned and as uniform as possible with data collection. Felt sad or hopeless, and again, using that definition that we stated earlier, which kind of summarizes depression, 27.6% of our students, so a little bit higher than the Middlesex League. If you look back, a little lower than the United States, but a little higher than what we've had in the past also. Okay. Seriously considered attempting suicide during the past 12 months. For BHS, that's 12%, which is a very high number for us. If you look back, I know in the past it was 11.7, and it seems less than some of the others, but when we think about what we can do proactively, and we'll get more into this under our recommendations, this is a number we take very seriously. Made a plan about how they would attempt suicide, 8.7%, and then actually attempted suicide 1 or more times during the past 12 months, it's 3.2%. So all those mental health numbers are alarming, And, when we talk about what we can do, I think a lot of our programming in the past has been about stress reduction, coping mechanisms, how do we handle stress? And our biggest inefficiency was offering kids this instruction, offering them this knowledge, and then never actually practicing it consistently. We tie together how physical activity plays a role. We tie together how sleep plays a role. But actually now implementing, programs or curriculum that demonstrate this and utilize this information in a more productive way. And so we've been trying to really focus on that moving forward. We've done a lot of things in our mental health kind of in that realm that we've created at the high school, whether it's through some of the staffing that we have, whether it's through just normal curriculum, or whether it's through identifying bridge program, our school adjustment counselors. We've had these other resources put in place, and so we hope that moving forward we create a better way to utilize these to address this. I think we're on the right path. When we talk about the recommendations later on in this, there's going to be some specific things that we recommend that we think we could do a little bit more and focus more on the mental health component. Being a health teacher, I care more about this than the academic part. We talk much more in our department about who we're creating as we leave here. And so going through how students can deal with things that end up being stressors, how they deal with adversity, those are the things that our curriculum really tries to reflect. Yes, the academic component is there, but we're much more, especially as the kids get older, juniors and seniors, we're focusing more on, how are you going to handle this when you're out in the world? As adults, as we all are, we know we all probably don't spend enough time on ourselves and really trying to minimize our stress or work through our stress in more productive ways. So our hope is with some of the recommendations we make later on that we're going to really try and focus on that and providing students opportunity to practice this within their school day and not relying solely on we're teaching them they'll do the right thing. So moving forward, that'll be a main focus of our curriculum. As we get into tobacco use and smoking, the positive, tobacco use in its traditional form is very minimal. It's gone down dramatically. Whether that's the trade-off for vaping, we'll see over time. But obviously the numbers they've shown the consistent decrease in smoking cigarettes. Currently, cigarettes that are being smoked on at least one day during the 30 days before the survey, BHS is at 1.9%, so a very small amount. The Middlesex League is at 4.2, and if we look at kind of where we've gone, it's always been low, and now it's continually getting lower, which is great to see. The trade-off is e-cigarettes and vaping. The question was, ever use an electronic vapor product, including e-cigarettes, vape pipes, vaping pens, on at least one day during the 30 days? That number is 40.4%. So that's high. When we look at our total population, 2/5 of our students are experimenting with this. So we know it's been on the rise the past couple of years. Our curriculum has reflected that. And again, in these recommendations, we're going to look at what we can do to better meet these needs for kids who are going down that path where they're utilizing this.
Yes.
Matt, just a quick question while we're on the vaping subject. Do you have the statistics for the middle school on vaping?
I do. One second. At the middle school right now, same question, it's 8.4%. So that's, again, much higher than what it's been in the past, but that increase between coming up through high school, I think it comes down to the casual use of it now. And whereas before, vaping was always an outlier 5 years ago. It was just something that a small community, a small percentage did, and now it's the norm. It's what cigarettes and tobacco were, 30 years ago, where there were smoking lounges, everywhere. Vaping has become the convenient outlet for that.
Mrs. Monaco has a question.
Yeah.
So all the students took this survey?
Majority, some had opt-out. We had
Um,
some opt-out, especially at the 6th grade.
Okay, and all the results are intertwined, it's not grouped by, for instance, are all the special ed kids in this pool?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And on the vaping, when was the survey done? Was it before the uproar with all the kids?
So this was done in the spring of 2019. So as we've seen in some of the other stuff that's come out, is that the fear, due to the lung illness that's associated with
Right.
vaping has happened kind of in that window between. It's been slowly kind of coming up last spring, but, I feel like towards the end of the spring and through the summer, this was again 2019, that's when the full-fledged fear, maybe panic, depending on how it was phrased, that's when that really kind of came to fruition.
So, since we're talking about vaping,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to make a suggestion for something that the schools could do. There's information about, the little pods, the jewels, or whatever they call them. It seems to me, from what I've read, they deliver an awful lot of nicotine for
Yeah,
the
it's a
ones
very
that are
concentrated
nicotine-based. And so the equivalent amount of, the amount that you get in vaping, the equivalent in cigarettes, smoking, is really, it's big. It's like, what, 3 packs a day or I don't know. I'm not trying to say it's that. I'm trying to say
No, it's much more concentrated.
It's
and
a big
being-
number.
It's taking less hits, it's much more convenient, you're getting a much more impactful hit every time that you're taking a draw from it.
Right, and one of the things that I would like to do is have some of that information go out to parents.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of parents, I think, who don't realize the degree to which their kids are actually getting hooked, because nicotine is very addictive. And, kids treat it kind of casually, and unless people realize, wow, this is the same amount as smoking so many packs of cigarettes a day, I just think we should provide that information.
I agree, and totally, as we're looking in the recommendations part later on, one of the things we're trying to do is get this information to parents in a more accessible way, whether that's going to PTO meetings or coming up with, our hope is to develop a student kind of flyer where we can kind of go, these are the top 10 issues we see based on the YRBS results. We're hopeful
As simple as send all the parents a letter, or send all the parents an email. Just want you to know, that kind of bullet points of information. Because I think a lot of parents would say, oh, whoa, I got to put my foot down on this, if they realized just how much it was affecting kids.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on what Mrs. Monica was saying, I think the number for the middle school is drastically lower than what's actually happening at the
Yeah, I
middle
agree.
school. So
They're lying.
I think we need to get parents on board early and not wait until high school to let them know. I don't think kids in the middle school are willing to admit that they're vaping, but what I'm hearing is there's an awful lot of it going on in the middle school. That's a
It's tucked up
major
their sleeve.
concern that I have.
They put it up their
Yeah, they're
sleeve.
tricky. I will say, to just kind of what the norm in terms of practice and behavior is, the industry has made it extremely accessible and extremely, they've done a great job of making an opportunity for kids to be able to do it, kind of under wraps. They've made ways that it's very hard to detect. It's hard to be able to identify a student who's doing it. I've walked into high school bathrooms and there's kids vaping, and unless I'm seeing it in their hand, there's really no direct way to tell. And so it's been a problem that, we've talked about administratively and trying to figure out some ways that we can kind of circumvent that. But that's also part of the appeal of the behavior, is that it's undetectable. So when it's a tough mountain to climb when it comes to that. But again, spreading more information at an earlier level absolutely is something that we need to focus on.
All right, so we're still talking about the high school at this
Still
point?
focusing on
Okay,
high school.
thank you.
So where we left off was currently used an electronic vapor product, which is 24%, which aligns directly with the Middlesex League average, higher than the United States, but similar to Massachusetts. And then vape nicotine on school property at least once in the past 30 days, 10.7%, which again is similar to Middlesex League average. So as we get into the next stage, which is alcohol and other drugs, nationally in 2017, 8% of 8th graders and 33% of 12th graders reported consuming alcohol in the past 30 days. Youth who drink alcohol are more likely to experience more school absences, failing or poor grades, alcohol-related crashes, or other unintentional injuries, and changes in brain development that have consequences on their performance in school and long-term health. It also, in addition to alcohol, this section focuses on drug use, which is, you're going to see some of the reflection of marijuana and what that looks like. So, ever drank alcohol? At least one drink of alcohol on at least one day during their life. Around 53%, which is pretty much similar to Middlesex League and Massachusetts average, up a little bit from our 2017 and 2016. At least one drink of alcohol on at least one day during the 30 days before the survey, right around 20.5%, a little bit lower than Middlesex League and Massachusetts numbers. Reported current binge drinking. Now, binge drinking is defined as 4 or more drinks of alcohol in a row for a female, or 5 or more drinks of alcohol in a row for a male within a couple hours on at least one day during the 30 days. BHS had 12.5%, lower than the Middlesex League average of 15, and lower than the Massachusetts and United States average. Also lower than previous years. But again, the decrease comes with a price, because as we look into some of our other numbers, whether it's vaping or marijuana use, those have steadily climbed. Ever used marijuana for BHS, that's 32%, lower than the Middlesex League, but if you look at our past numbers, a sizable jump from 2017 and 2016.
It's legal now.
Currently use marijuana, 20.5%, so a fifth of our students. Again, right in line with Middlesex League, but higher than 2017, 2016. Use marijuana on school property at least once in the past 30 days, 6.2%, similar to Middlesex League, but if you look at 2017, that's a sizable jump. And again, students aren't just vaping nicotine, they're vaping marijuana. And the ability to detect, the ability to, again, prevent, we're limited in what we can do in certain ways. We hope to be able to do more, especially when it comes to when we actually find someone who's violating these school rules, and we'll talk more about that with our recommendations. During your life, how many times have you used a prescription drug for recreational purposes? 8.9%, which is higher than the Middlesex League, and then ever used cocaine was 3.2%, higher again from the Middlesex League, up from our past iterations too. And then lastly, we're offered, sold, or given an illegal drug on school property, 13.8%, 0.2% higher than Middlesex League, and higher than 2017, lower than 2016. Again, with the stealthiness of how a lot of these marijuana and nicotine-based products are created, I believe that number wholly. They're meant to be coy, they're meant to be deceptive, that's how they're created now. And students are very aware of what that market is. So when we get into sexual behavior and HIV, specifically we're gonna look at contraception, we're gonna talk about student knowledge and activity. So ever had sexual intercourse at BHS, that's 25.9%, consistent with Middlesex League, and right around where we've been in the past. We're currently sexually active, 19.6%, a little bit higher than Middlesex League and lower than we were in 2017. As we get into, for me, like as we're talking about what are the really risky behaviors, yeah, this next question is alarming to me. Drank alcohol or used drugs, 19.8%. So drugs and alcohol are being a part of a lot of this decision making, which, as we all know, is going to be a dangerous road for a lot of these kids who are making choices under the influence. Did not use a condom during last sexual intercourse among students who are currently sexually active, 37%, which is a high number. In talking to students about this, one of the things that we talked about, they remember contraception. They don't really remember as much about STDs. Contraception is the main scare tactic when, students are, from the student's point of view, they look at, I don't want to have a baby, I don't want to get pregnant, and STDs try to fall along the side of that. So when we're talking about some of these numbers, just the student perception of what is important when they're making choices about their own sexual health, they tend to pick and choose what they care about, which is alarming. Did not use any method to prevent pregnancy during last sexual intercourse, 6.6%, which is actually or receive sexual messages or nude or semi-nude pictures or videos electronically, that's 40%, higher than the Middlesex League average, but lower than where we were in 2017. Have been taught about AIDS or HIV infection in school, so BHS is 73.3%, that number is higher than the Middlesex League and where we were in 2017. had been taught in school about birth control, 71.6%, which is higher again for Middlesex League and then where we were in 2017. Had been taught in school about how to use condoms, 33.5%, which is lower than Middlesex League and lower where we were in 2017. This statistic infuriates me as a health teacher because we have done more to make that content more memorable. And for students not to remember specific components of what we've done means that we need to change up how we're doing it. Most of the time when you talk about condom use in a high school classroom, that is an at-attention moment in our classroom. Students are either, whether they're on board or not, they are aware of what's being taught. And so the fact that our numbers are lower about that is alarming. And so we're gonna look at addressing how we teach that and what we can do to make that, one, more impactful, and two, we don't wanna scare kids about contraception, but we also wanna make sure that the message is being very clearly sent. And then lastly, the last section is nutrition and physical activity. Looking at this, it has a lot to do with body perception, how many people, what they're doing to address their weight, their activity levels. We were really lucky when we were looking at the diet-related numbers that came up in our YRBS. They were pretty unremarkable. Haven't changed a lot over time when it's come to students who eat breakfast, when it comes to how frequently they're eating vegetables. Much more comes down to kind of the choices that they're making, like when they're independent. So during the past 30 days, in order to lose weight or to keep from gaining weight, have you done or used any of the following? Took diet pills, powders, or liquids without a doctor's advice? 3% of Burlington students have done that, again, compared to Middlesex League of 2.7, so that number's a little up. During the past 30 days, in order to lose weight or to keep from gaining weight, have you done or used any of the following? Made yourself vomit or took laxatives? 3.4%, which is lower than the Middlesex League. Past 30 days, in order to lose weight or to keep from gaining weight, have you done or used any of the following? Not eaten for 24 hours or more? 8.8%. Higher than the Middlesex League. Next question has to do with activity level. Played video or computer games or used a computer for 3 or more hours per day, including iPads, tablets, smartphones, social media. 46.1% compared to the Middlesex League average of 44.4%. And again, a little bit higher than where we were in 2017. Next one is describe themselves as slightly or very overweight. So 27.8%, and the Middlesex League is 27.7%. Again, lower than Massachusetts, lower than the United States averages, but a little higher than where we were in 2017 and 2016. So student activity levels, we had a conversation earlier today kind of about this. Activity levels are such an individual choice, because some students are just locked into their screen, they're locked in academically, and we provide certain activity opportunities, but students look to take advantage. They have to take that step to take advantage of it. Part of our recommendations is offering more of these student activity levels throughout the day. Again, trying to provide students with opportunities to practice better choices, better behaviors throughout our school day. That's going to be a part of what we look to do moving forward. We do have one last session, which is the other questions that kind of fall in the gaps of those previous categories. The first one is takes medicine or receiving treatment from a doctor or other health professional for any type of behavioral health, mental health condition, or emotional problem. 15.3%. Middlesex League average is 17.2%. We have no previous data on that, but as a starting point, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And then did not get 8 or more hours of sleep on an average school night. 76.9% didn't get 8 or more. Middlesex League average is 76.4. In 2017, the number was 84.1 and 72.7. Which brings us to something that's kind of a sidebar on this is when we've done the sleep survey over the past 2 years. So prior to us going to the early school, the later start time, we did a pre and a post survey with the group of kids that we had at this time in the building that we're going to be back the following year so that we can kind of get some data moving forward. It's not the cleanest survey in the world, my apologies for that, but it's one of the things that we wanted to get some data about because we knew it was coming, and if we didn't, that would be lost. So we looked at students who were reporting, and I have a link in here to some of the other questions. I'll get to those in a moment. But the main change that we saw, if you look at, we have the 2018 survey and the 2019 survey up here. So we kind of combined who got 7 to 8 and then 8 or more hours of sleep, and those numbers increased dramatically between the 2018 and the 2019. If you look at the grade 12, so this were students who were in grade 11 in 2018 and then grade 12 in 2019. An additional 23.3% were getting 7 or more hours, so that number went up a huge amount compared to where they were previously. In grade 11, up 6.1%, and in grade 10, up 1.6%. So again, the later start time has allowed these students, at least in this sample, in this question, to be able to get more sleep, and it seems a fair amount of students are taking advantage of it. Anecdotally, just talking to students about this and just trying to get some feedback about how they're doing in classes, how they're doing in terms of school preparedness, how athletics plays a role in this, students are looking on it favorably. Probably one of the most prominent responses I get when I talk to students about how they're doing with the later start time is a lot of students who are busier students, are students who have a high course demand in terms of academic work when they get home. They feel that they can go slower through it. They're not getting home and like right after a game, opening up a book and I hate to say it, just forcing their way through it and just trying to get it done. They're able to take their time with it. And I think some of that stems from the fact that maybe students aren't getting the full 8 or more that we want, but they're getting more. And they know in the morning they have time now, which has been a huge, just in terms of a stress reliever for something that's pending, something that's due, some kind of academic demand. Having additional time matters, and it slows down their demands. And I think that's a huge benefit that's really hard to measure, but again, anecdotally, I think it's been a consistent theme throughout it. Looking at this sleep survey, so give me a second. So I just went through and highlighted a few points. One of the things, again, not a perfect survey, but we asked students about device access. We asked them about what time are they going to bed, what time are they getting up. But one of the things that I think is probably the most telling, if we get into the one of the questions that I really liked, how would you describe your level of alertness during the first period of the school day? Because essentially, one of the main benefits of having this later start time is, in theory, students are going to be more prepared to learn at that later time. They're getting more rest, they're allowed to wake up, give themselves more of a gap between when they wake up and when they have to actually academically perform. And so those numbers changed, which I thought was really telling. Down here, what's funny about it is the amount of students who consider themselves alert and full of energy, that number stayed consistent, which makes sense, right? Like if you're a kid who's up at 7:30 ready to go, you're gonna be fine at 8:30 ready to go. But what I found to be most impactful was the students on the other end of that scale. Two choices that dramatically changed were students who claimed they were less alert, mostly tired, and still in the process of waking up, and again, this is where they are in period 1. That number went up by 3%, and then students who were physically present but mentally asleep, that number went up by 4%. So meaning that change, they're no longer feeling that way in the first period. So those are the kids who I think might be probably more impacted by that. Students who just, are in zombie mode when they show up first period, and now we're having less and less of that. And when you're talking about academic impact, those are the kids that probably need that even more. Our high-performing students are going to be high-performing. It's a credit to them. Regardless of the institutional setup, they're going to be, I don't want to say fine, but this is not going to be the barrier that holds most of them back. But for our students who really struggle getting to school, who struggle with performance, this is really where a benefit is showing. So out of that survey, we can go more into that if you want, but to me, those were probably the most valuable questions that we drew out of that, were how ready students, if the student's staying up later, that's their prerogative, but they're still getting quality sleep, which I think, again, is the goal. So getting back to the YRBS. So last question here, has at least one teacher or other adult in your school that you can talk to if you have a problem? For BHS, that's 55.2%. For the Middlesex League, it's 59.6%. This number surprisingly has gone down, which was disappointing to our subcommittee. 2017, we're at 63.4%. In 2016, we were at 69.8%. So we used to hover around 70%, then 64, and now we're down to 55, which is alarming because we've actually put in some programs to kind of circumvent that. We've had some moment, beginning of school, we put a name chart up on the wall, and that's normally filled out pretty quickly, where have you identified with this gaps, the kids who haven't, someone hasn't come in and marked their name off, and we make a proactive effort to kind of meet these kids and just, again, outside of academic setting, have you connected with these students. So there's been more proactive work in that. Moving forward, that's going to be one of our main focus for recommendations, and so I'll get into that. in a moment. The last thing, which is a component of the YRBS this year, and in the past year, is the drug-free community questions. So drug-free community questions ask about perception, not necessarily about the behavior itself. It's about how do you perceive these things as being risky? Are they damaging? Are they a health risk to participate in these behaviors? And so we have some good data for this. So the drug-free community questions look primarily at the perception of different behaviors through the eyes of the student. These questions provide insight into how students view the nature of a specific behavior in relation to how dangerous or risky it is, how it is viewed by their peers, and how it is viewed by their parents. So a few questions that we thought were interesting. So we do have some data from 2017. Some of the questions have been added, so we don't have previous data for it. The first question was, how much do you think people risk harming themselves physically or in other ways if they smoke marijuana once or twice a week? 20.4% of our students answered there's no risk to it, up from 9.9% in 2017, which I think is a direct reflection of the change in legislation. And the other question, how much do you think people risk harming themselves physically or in other ways if they use e-cigarettes or vaping? 7.2% of students answered no risk. There was no previous question about this, but again, there is a disconnect between the facts that are out there and what students perceive. Two other questions that we thought were interesting. How wrong do your friends feel it would be for you to use vape products? 28.7% of students answered not at all wrong. And again, no previous data there. And then how wrong do your friends feel it would be for you to smoke marijuana? 28% of students answered not at all wrong, up from 6.8%. So that number's quadrupled since 2017. So the perceptions in students' eyes of whether these behaviors are risky or how dangerous they are is really reflective now in what the data is showing. They're just viewing this on a smaller scale in terms of their long-term health impact. Again, when we surveyed, I bet you if we asked this question now specifically about vaping after the immediate acute lung illness that's associated with vaping, I assume those numbers would be down, but it is telling that that's kind of where they started before that we needed a state health crisis to really kind of bring those numbers into a perspective.
Mrs. Monaco had a question.
Yeah, on the marijuana use, it seems to me, with adults, that a lot of adults are using marijuana, but they're not smoking it. Do we have any idea with kids, do they
There was
use
no
it
questions
in
about
other ways?
edibles or any other kind of like oils or other things that are now talking about perception of it. I think it would fall in line with the results here. Students are viewing it as a whole, and again, the smoking was always kind of, from a teaching perspective, that was one of the main hooks when we're talking about the negative consequences, is the damage to lungs. You know, now that it's coming in so many other forms, it's kind of made us have to rethink how we're teaching that, because we'd really focus a lot on students, if you're smoking something that you obtained illegally, you have no idea to know what's in it. At least cigarettes, you have there's a list, whereas with these products, we have no idea. And so we've lost one of our main kind of avenues. So we're reevaluating how we're looking at, especially teaching about edibles and some of the other ways that students are utilizing it.
That was my concern. Again, I don't know the answer, but I wonder if smoking marijuana is more harmful than perhaps the edibles or whatever. I don't know.
That's been proven that it is. It's just a matter of, just because of the method.
It
of
is
how
what? I'm sorry.
It is more harmful.
Okay.
To smoke,
Yeah, because it has direct contact with, the lung system, the respiratory system, whereas the other way is, it kind of needs to be broken down throughout the body and gets to the bloodstream in different, less aggressive manner. And so there's always been a high risk of having cardiorespiratory illness, things like that, with smoking marijuana. And now for kids or adults who are utilizing that but not using that main method of ingestion, it's become, again, what do we teach next? And so part of it is, especially with state regulations now that are out there, there's a lot of facts that we can now talk about marijuana use, and so we've had to look at how we teach it.
And is that something that is addressed in teaching?
Yeah, at the high school level, absolutely. We talk about edibles,
Okay.
we talk about oils, we talk about all that.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to comment about these perception questions, what you're calling the drug-free community questions, because I do think that the change in the laws has changed how dangerous kids think marijuana is. But the question is asking, how do you think your friends think? And I think it could be very easy to interpret that in a way that we really don't know. Because a kid who personally thinks there is a risk might think that all their friends think, they might all talk together about how, oh, well, now, I mean, now they've seen it's legal, so it can't be that dangerous. But in fact, they might feel differently. So I think we need to be careful. These are, as you said very clearly, these are perception questions. I think there are other things, I mean, there are lots of things to be concerned about in all these results, but how do you think your friends think is
Right.
maybe not my top priority of what to worry about, so.
No, that's fair. I think the one thing that it comes down to with these perception questions talks about, like, the commonality of it. You know, whereas 10 years ago,
Yeah.
these responses would have been very different. And I think the casual nature of what marijuana abuse has become, whether it's for adults or for kids, whether it's how it's displayed in media, you know, billboards, everything now, that is the trend, and that's where it's heading. So as we finish up for the high school, we just want to talk about what recommendations we met. Now, these are again from our subcommittee that look at kind of the structure and what we're doing as a whole, considering all school kind of entities that exist within it and trying to figure out ways that we can maybe improve our education or make some efforts to decrease the impact of some of these behaviors. So first of all, we want to share the YRBS data with staff, students, and parents via various avenues. For example, myself and Susan Fay, a wonderful teacher at the middle school, we were there last week at their 21st Century Learning Day, and we held a focus group on the YRBS stress numbers with middle school students, which was very eye-opening. Middle schoolers in general tend to be eye-opening, but just to ask them questions about their opinions for ourselves, for understanding a little bit better of the responses, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the middle school YRBS. Our hope is, so we have our Wellness Day coming up. We ran it last year, which was a really positive experience for students. We're running it on the 11th of this year. Our keynote is going to be Minding Your Mind speakers, which we've had in the past. But this time we're asking them to focus a little bit on some of these YRBS results and to tie in kind of what our numbers are about some of the content that they're going to be talking about. So I'm going to be presenting with them, and we'll be sharing some of these numbers. Again, we don't want to bore students with an hour full of data, but we are going to tie in some of this content to what these speeches are through these speakers that are coming in for Wellness Day. And then lastly, and probably for me most importantly, the Flex Block and Advisory. Flex Block and Advisory has been proposed now and is going to be worked into our new schedule. Our hope is to get the subcommittee proposed by Mark, I know that. We hope to get that off the ground as soon as we possibly can, because it's going to be a lot of work. We want to make sure it's the right work and prepared well, because the rollout of that is really going to matter. Looking at it and going to be someone who's heavily involved in the programming for that, this is going to be the main avenue we look at addressing some of these content areas. We're going to have flexibility through advisory to kind of have these bigger discussions. That's going to, for those of you who are unfamiliar, advisory is going to be small student groups with one faculty member leading a group that you kind of stay with that group throughout the year. And the curriculum is going to be very much based on social emotional learning and tying in some of this data into kind of what we see in the building and making it kind of like a living, breathing connection with our students. So one, we expect that to address do we have an adult in the building that you kind of feel comfortable talking to, but more importantly, it's going to be a really important access point for things that are coming up, whether it's something in the community that happens that we feel we need a forum to connect with kids on, or if it's something that behaviorally, some of these behaviors where we're talking about how marijuana is perceived now in 2020. That's a prime avenue for what our content is going to be looking at. So that's the advisory component. The Flex Block component has a lot of freedom in it, and what our hope is to build in a lot of enrichment activity during that, with these enrichments being opportunities for additional physical activity, using enrichment as a placeholder for having small talks with bigger groups of students. So for example, we're doing a big issue, we're talking about consent a lot with our seniors. Flex Block is going to be an opportunity for us to talk about consent with other groups, because curricularly you do get kind of stretched in terms of what you need to get through with your curriculum throughout the year and make sure that you're educating your students the best we can, but we also want to find little spaces where we can work in some and it's not always as consistent. Some of it just comes down to pure logistics, whereas we have held sophomore, senior year, and we need to talk about it with juniors. And so it gives us these opportunities to really connect with students. And so I know our ILT team and the faculty as a whole is really looking forward to this, because it's going to be really valuable with how we connect with our students. I think it's going to be a really powerful part of our whole school education as we move forward. When talking to staff members, one of the biggest problems we have is just the ability to kind of address our passions, address the things that are interests that may not fall within our curricular alignment. And a lot of that comes down to just wanting to provide kids with a forum and a connection space where we can talk about things that matter to them. And that's hard to do when you have an AP exam in a couple months, or when you're all, when we're trying to get to, through certain content, and it may not just fit in with what you're doing. And so this is really going to provide our students and our faculty kind of that opening for those connections. And, we really look to take advantage of it. And so, again, we're very grateful that we have those stipend positions that, hopefully are going to be passed, so we can start that subcommittee work, because we really have an idea of what we want to do and a real focus for how we're going to use that time. So, again, in terms of how we're going to share this data, that's one of our main points for that. Other things we're planning on doing, develop a YRBS guidebook for students that focuses on key results and what the school does to address the issue, also outlining proactive tips for students. So students don't get a lot of this data. We use it in our health classes, but again, if you don't have health during this term, during this year, then you're missing out on some of that. So being able to provide all students with this. As we said, utilizing FlexBlock and advisory program as an access point for programming. We talked about that. Continuing to implement the RCADS, which is a survey that started this year, scale. That happens in grade 4, grade 6, grade 9. With that, there's the utilization of the Interface service. Interface is a referral service that works for the town.
Matt, just again, remember YRBS is an anonymous survey. The RCADS is not. So when Chrissy Robinson came and spoke to you in the fall, she described the RCADS process, and she said one of her frustrations with the YRBS is we'll get the mental health data, but she can't track the mental health data back to an individual student. The RCADS lets her track it back to an individual student, and they were screening some kids who weren't showing up in other areas. So they found that helpful. So this was the first year, Matt, they did it all 4, all 6, and all 9th grade students.
And they do it twice with each group, and so moving forward, that's going to be the norm.
Okay.
It's to see where we are at the beginning of the year and see where they are again. Next, as we said, regarding the violence numbers here, I'm sorry. You have a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to speak again to confidentiality. The day of or the day after the middle school took this, there were some students who were caught vaping, and the rumor was that it was seen on their iPads when they took test, or not the test, when they took the survey, thank you, that they made that, of course, they would, that direct connection. So it was a coincidence. I tried to say it's anonymous, but can you reiterate or explain where this data goes, how this is not tracked on their iPads?
Yeah, this is just a website that kids go into, and there's no question about link for Burlington surveys, and that is the only link they have access to, and it's just correlated, and honestly, it doesn't track an email address that comes with it. Once you hit submit, all it does is track your response. So there is no way to trace who it's to. There is no way to check which device did it. It is as anonymous as it can be. Again, the RCADS it's not.
Yes.
But to be able to do this, because we've had students, and again, every student is a conspiracy expert. To get them, and so we had students who were changing iPads before they were doing it to be like, I'll show you. It's like, guys, it's doing nothing. So once we were able to kind of alleviate those fears or those strategic ways that they're trying to manipulate the test, it really, I think most of the students in the high school came to find that. I think as this becomes the norm in the middle school, students will accept kind of where we're at with this and understand that. Part of what we need to do a better job of is kind of pre-YRBS is explaining process behind it, explaining the usefulness of the data. We had a bump in the road a couple of years ago with our high school seniors who were, I don't want to say offended by taking this, but they were like, I'm a good kid, I shouldn't have to answer these questions. And I'm like, well, that's great. you can show that here. And, you know, I think because we didn't provide enough context for what it's for and what we were trying to do, and so we've done a better job of that in the past, over recent YRBS implementations. Now we just need to do that in the middle school.
Thank you.
Right, okay.
So on to the next recommendation, review and promote the active bystander concept through in-services and instruction. Again, those are kind of reflective of those violence numbers we talked about, just because we're not seeing that, so there must be a gap somewhere in terms of reporting some of this behavior and how we're monitoring the areas in our school. Revamping the student at-risk
Regarding that.
referral process.
Okay, there was a
Yeah.
question about that. Go ahead.
Could any of this be happening like at sporting events, football games, or not, so they're considering it on school, and it is on school, but it's not necessarily in the school where
Right.
you have
I
administrators?
believe that, yes.
and-
I believe it could be parking lots, it could be, you know, on the way to a game. But we were talking about weapons and how, you know, there was a high number for students who were threatened with a weapon. We don't believe those weapons are physically on school grounds. It's a matter of a kid saying, I'm gonna go home and get this, and do, you know, and so again, some of it comes down to how the question is perceived and understood by the student, and whether that's accurately reflecting what the question's asking. So yes, I do think a lot of it is that. But again, we also wanna be proactive about it.
No matter where it's
Yeah.
taking place, it's important.
Mhm.
Yep, thank you.
No problem. So revamping the student at-risk / referral review process. So we've already actually done this in the high school. The at-risk procedure became kind of inefficient. We were trying to tackle all at-risk students per grade, like in kind of a 3-hour meeting, like we do like grade 10, then we get to grade 11, like on another day. And it wasn't effective anymore. And so that's already been broken down into smaller smaller meeting groups so that we can really focus on providing services for the kids who need it. So that's already started. Another one is implementing a school climate survey or something similar to be administered in the off year of the YRBS process that can ask maybe some different questions that might be reflective of maybe some of the gaps in the YRBS or things that we want to look to address, but also create our own data collection for things that are, again, on those off years to just reflect what we think is important and behaviors that are prevailing. Unfortunately, when we're part of a bigger conglomerate, change then becomes a little bit more difficult. And so if this is something that we choose to administer, or something that we develop, or maybe have someone else develop that we like, it just gives us a little bit more data that we can look forward to.
Great.
Next up, under school committee recommendations, we're advocating for additional school adjustment counselors to address the continual need for mental health education and support. You know, mental health in terms of how our school helps it, we're really taking up an all-encompassing approach to what students are going through. And with that, those numbers, we don't see really, you know, they're not going away. And so with that, we're going to find different ways that we can address student needs throughout the school day. Looking at this, and again, trying to advocate for more mental health professionals on site, it's a big ask, but it's reflected in kind of what our student needs are. We had our our school counseling department, and our bridge program kind of put together some of the numbers of what they're going through and what their caseload looks like, and it's a lot. Right now, we have one school adjustment counselor that works with students who aren't in bridge. She's currently seeing 36 students, which equates to like one every period, which is manageable, but it's a lot when you talk about like each session is roughly an hour and you're talking about what we can do to help these kids. Next year, when we go to a different schedule, you know, so right now she's seeing 36 kids per week. Next year, we'll only have 25 periods in our school day, so maybe changing up how frequently we see, but again, there's issues now with frequency of seeing some of these kids. Part of that is also, there's a waiting list for these services because we just don't have enough resources for it. We have 12 students who are currently on that waiting list. And part of it then goes into how they also move through, like how they qualify for services, whether that's through us, whether that's through Burlington Youth Family Services, right? Because we do outsource a lot to that.
I think there's a question
Yeah.
here.
It's more of a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see some programs developed where students are enlisted to help each other. Awareness of differences, you know, concern for others, empathy for others. Instead of it always being on the staff to do the work, I think if we teach our kids to take care of and feel for one another, it would go a long way towards alleviating some of the stress, the depression. If somebody's nice to you, it helps a lot. So it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, so one of our hopes is through this Flex Block is to utilize the mentor program in a different way. Mentor program now is kind of about managing academic course load and kind of the changing dynamic when you become a freshman and what that means. Our hope is to utilize mentor as really what that is, as having mentors provide them with a curriculum that's a little more reflective of social emotional learning, and have that be a little bit more consistent through advisory and Flex Block. Because we want to be able to have students advocate for themselves, but also advocate for each other. And, when you have an authentic connection with another student that's not in your peer group, that matters to kids. And that shows that bigger connection to the building, it shows a bigger connection to the town, to the community. And so our hope is to really kind of push that through with that program.
Sort of like an elaboration on a buddy system where
It's
kids.
like big brothers, big sisters,
Yeah, I don't think there's anywhere near enough of that at Burlington High School at this point in time. And I would really like to see programs put in place to teach kids how to help one another.
Well, we look forward to.
Never let someone sit alone in the cafeteria, that kind of thing,
I understand. So again, yeah, we're hopeful. One of our main goals for this opportunity for Flex Block and advisory is to really focus on school culture and what we do socially to each other. And so that's a focal point. So getting back to this, with the school adjustment counselor, and again, what our Bridge program brings, the tiers of how we see kids who are dealing with mental health issues is really, it's growing. And we have three tiers for how we address this. The first tier has to do with our guidance, with our school counselors. Sorry, there's some change in terminology that I'm trying to catch up to. With our school counselors, and that's tier 1 where they deal where, a kid notifies a guidance counselor of an issue or a teacher of an issue, and guidance counselor is the first to check in. Then they go to tier 2, which is the the school adjustment counselor. All right, and they're trying to determine kind of what is the extreme, what is the magnitude of what the issue is, and then whether that's a qualification for Bridge, or whether that's outside counseling, or consistently seeing the school adjustment counselor. That's kind of where we're at right now, is in this pattern of where students go when they have a mental health crisis or when they have consistent mental health issues. And again, as I said, those numbers are not going to go away. And so can we more proactively address these kids who need support? And then how can we also work with them so that academically they're not paying the price there? Because that's a big part of it. If students have to miss a class due to a mental health emergency, we're fine with one class and we'll make it work. But if it becomes a consistent thing, we have to make sure that the academic follow through with that isn't being lost, because again, that's just going to magnify whatever issues they're dealing with. And so keeping students on task academically and not taking them totally out of that process when they're dealing with something is one of the main focal points as we move forward. So moving on, we want to update and implement new programming regarding sexual behaviors to reflect local areas of need. That's just updating curriculum with kind of what these focal points are. Development of an intramural or unified program to promote increased physical activity opportunities for all students. I was talking to Dr. Conti this morning, and kind of in the early stages of a unified program, but one of the things we talked about at the high school level is offering on a small scale an intramural program for students who just don't have access to the ability to play after-school sports. The lack of user fee is such a great thing that we have in our school. It's so useful in terms of getting kids involved, but we do have a specific population that just doesn't have the opportunity to participate in after-school activities for various reasons, whether it's work or family demands, and that's a part of what we're doing here. Part of how we get students, one of the carrots we dangle for students is the ability to do things they enjoy, and for a lot of our students, because of work demands or because what they have to do at home, they just don't get that. This past fall, we had the majority of the ELL students come out to our soccer practices because they want to play soccer, but they can't. And it's unfortunate. This is one of their joys out of life. And so when everything is work or school, it's hard to get up for those things. And so we really had a great opportunity to have these kids come out to our practices. It happened 2 or 3 times. Kids were great, the players handled it great, but we wanted to do something more consistent, where they have maybe 3 or 4 opportunities each season to really get out and try and do something with their peers that's not 6 days a week, that's not a huge time demand. but it's just an opportunity to connect with their peers in a different way. I could tell you, from our group that we had that come out to us, our students really reached out to these kids. And normally the ELL students kind of, I don't want to say self-isolate, but that's a group where there's a communication barrier. And these kids now are integrated with our other students who play soccer. And it's just, again, another connection that makes them feel more at home in our building and more like they have a social network that, that kind of relies on them. And that's what brings kids into school some days. And so it's been a very beneficial outcome from that. And our hope is to kind of expand that to all 3 seasons and possibly, again, on a small scale to start, just to see what numbers look like, but to offer these opportunities for students to kind of get involved in athletics or activity that is not a full-time commitment. With that, more increased physical activity opportunities, that also aligns with our Flex Block and the advisory program. Next up, provide staff with professional development focused on mental health awareness. One of the suggestions that we had was potentially an internal audit for mental health and student differences to see kind of where the gaps in our system may be, to look at kind of what we do and can we do it better? Can we do it more efficiently? Is it far-reaching enough? Probably our biggest problem we have when it comes to our mental health capacity is the fact that we have X amount of students who qualify for Bridge, X amount who qualify for the school adjustment counselor, but that's a small minority of our total students. And to be honest with you, when we're talking about students who are struggling in the building, if they don't have a specific diagnosis, if they don't have a specific criteria, they don't qualify for those services. And so that's the majority of our students. So what can we do to help those kids? And so looking at mental health and looking at kind of how we approach it as a whole, to see like how we can do a better job with those kids who may not be able to access those services, I think it's going to be a big point as we move forward.
And if I could just say, I think that's another place where the kinds of issues that Mrs. Monaco is talking about, because you mentioned here student differences and mental health, and so I think there's a variety of kinds of student differences that could be addressed in those kinds of training for teachers to be more aware, whatever audit, whatever we're doing.
Yeah. 2 more here. Developing a vape and diversion program for students who violate school rules regarding chemical health. One of our problems is when a student is caught vaping, they get the punitive punishment that's with that without really a educational component. And so we want to work towards providing students with a diversion program for students who are caught with that, so that when they come back, we're now not just punishing, but we're also educating. We're taking those steps to say, hey, if this is something that you've chosen to do, here's the downsides, here's the negatives that go along with that. Here's how you can help, here's some resources that we have. Because just bringing a school student back in, they're gonna reoffend. The suspension that comes with it, for some kids is enough, but for a lot of kids who are either addicted or who choose to continue this behavior, that's not gonna be enough of a negative to take them out of the behavior. And then lastly, for the high school recommendations, is to continue to implement the YRBS at the high school and the middle school in conjunction with the Middlesex League 12 cycle that's being developed by the Superintendent's Council. We're going to continue to do this process with reviewing data, developing a subcommittee, and then bringing that information to school committee, bringing that information hopefully to parents and to students as we move forward. So that aligns with what we've already done. So.
I would like to thank you that's an amazing report. You've given us a lot of information. I'd like to ask the school committee members if they have any other comments, questions. Pardon?
Just on the high school.
Oh, are you going to continue?
I'm going to continue.
You are going to continue, okay. Then I'd like to ask that maybe it's been a while and we do want to understand this information. If I don't know, do you expect that the middle school report will be as long? Because I'm aware that it's a long thing, so.
No, it's a lot more condensed because one, they're only having about 2/3 of the questions.
Okay.
And most of the recommendations and kind of
Are similar.
have already been addressed.
Okay, good.
It's more of
All right.
just sharing
Any
the
questions right now? No. Okay, so go ahead.
data.
Yeah, Mrs. Verganti has a question. Can you pass her the microphone? Thank you.
Have you thought about integrating the yoga or meditation program to
Glad you asked
relieve
that.
the stress?
So part of Wellness Day, what we're doing next month is we're bringing in some yoga professionals to come in and provide workshops. with our hope of being to have a consistent relationship with them so that they can come in during flex block. Right now, we do offer yoga throughout our PE curriculum. It's not a consistent class. It's something that we kind of view as like a stress reliever day. So it is off. Classes probably go through it 3 or 4 times a semester. We're hoping to do it more frequently. We know the mental health benefits, the physical benefits of it, and so our hope is to kind of work some of that in more consistently. The main staff that we had that used to be able to do that, unfortunately, have taken other positions in different districts, so unless I'm doing it, it's not pretty. We're looking for the right people to be able to implement that. So we're actually developing a relationship with a community resource center now. And so I hope that-
Okay,
Yes.
maybe I'll talk to you later about it.
No,
So
that'd
I
be
know
great.
so about so.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so here we go, middle school. All right, so I do excuse, there are a lot of repetitive slides, but the goal is for this to be a working tool for the middle school staff and for the high school staff, so I will just move my way through to where we set numbers. Probably the most important thing to understand, again, for middle school, not only, but 594 students were surveyed. So 1% equals roughly 6 students, so that number was a little higher than high school. Same ideas about what these questions are broken down into. Unintentional violence is the first category. So again, because the middle school first did the formal YRBS, under this in 2017, we don't have that long of a backlog of data. So this is what we're using moving forward. Same format with, if it's yellow, it's above the middle sex league average. So rode with a driver who had been drinking alcohol in a car or other vehicle. For MSMS, that was 9.6%. For the middle sex league, it was 12.5%. In 2017, that was 52.6%. So a big decrease. Now, one thing to consider, because we are now adding the 6th graders as part of this data pool for the current YRBS, 6th graders tend to be the group that's probably the least risky in terms of behaviors. So some of that's going to be a little bit on a different scale. The other question is, in the past, and Simon and I have discussed this, is about, they need to start identifying, we've had this feedback to JSI, is this a parent, is this a friend, is this a parent's friend, who these people are that are doing this, because that matters, especially in the perception. The next question, we're electronically bullied, right? County being bullied through texting or social media. That number is 33.1%. The Middlesex League is 30%, but that is up considerably from 2017. We're bullied on school property. For middle school, that was 17.9% compared to 16.7%, but down from 2017. As we get into mental health, and again, a lot of these questions are kind of scaled back in a little bit more of a less intense version because we are looking at a different age group. Are currently taking medicine or receiving treatment for behavioral health, mental health conditions, or emotional conditions. For middle school, that's 9.6, which is less than the Middlesex League and lower than 2017. Seriously considered attempting suicide, 12.1%, which is down from 2017 and also much less than the Middlesex League average. Again, these numbers are high. I think when we look at this, it's hard, the context of 12.1% to say that's a low number is misleading, but it is lower than the average. Made a plan about how they would attempt suicide. For middle school, that's 6.5%. Middlesex League is 8.5%, and again, lower than 2017. Then attempted suicide one or more times during the past 12 months is 2% for the middle school, lower than Middlesex League in 2017. I think when we think about middle school, we tend to think, again, they're participating in less risky behaviors, and I think that's probably accurate when we talk about drug abuse, when we talk about sexual activity. When we talk about mental health, I don't think that's fair. I think it's, this is the same risk group in terms of frequency and what's going on. I don't think looking at them because they're younger, we can just dismiss that. So this is probably one of the main differences between the two surveys is when they look at stress levels and where those are coming from. So there's 2 questions here that Middlesex League asked that are specific to sources that cause the most negative stress in their life. And this is actually, these 2 questions are the source of what we did our focus group down at the middle school last week for the 21st Century Learning. So the highest one for middle schoolers was actually 30.9, so where's the most negative stress? And that was from school demands and expectations, such as assignments and homework. I think that probably makes sense. We were a little lower than the Middlesex League in the 2017, but where we were higher was busy schedules, including school activities and sports, Parent and family demands and expectations was higher than the Middlesex League. Difficulty getting enough sleep was a little bit higher, and then extracurricular activities, demands or pressures were higher also. In the focus group that we talked about, it was an interesting group of kids anyways, but just to hear some of their feedback on where they thought their most pressing negative stressor was, most of them thought school demands were too much, which is fair. I think if we ask most students that's what they're gonna say. But I think when we look at school course loads at all levels, that is problematic. I think we look at how overscheduled students are when it comes to their choices in the building and their choices outside of the building, which matters almost as much. Students they're spread very thin, and that starts at an early age. And I think the toll that takes from middle school up through high school for a student who wants to excel in a sport and has to do 3 different leagues for the sport, and then also wants to take an instrument and things that are looked at as positives. This starts now earlier and earlier for the taxing way that this kind of builds on the student and what they expect for their work demands. So just looking at this, it was just insightful to see what their negative stress was. This next question had to do with school-related factors. Having to study things you do not understand was 21.1%. Teachers expecting too much of you is 19.2%, which were higher than the Middlesex League average. So those were just things that in the discussion group that we had, putting, first of all, making realistic expectations for coursework is always a tough ask for students. When students sign up for their courses, they look at, what am I supposed to take next? What's next curricularly? And then more importantly, if they have some freedom, what am I going to like? Rarely do they consider work demand. Work demand is kind of like the reality of the wish that they wanted. And so when we're talking about this, and we've talked about this at the high school now, and we think it's a step we want to take, is when we're developing our course catalog, is associating a specific rating to what that demand is outside of the classroom. For example, if you're taking an AP class, that requires X amount of work, whatever kind of category, whatever way we categorize that, versus a specific, basic Bio 101 class. What's the difference there? Because when students start to get free choice in their academic, classes, I think understanding what that expectation is probably one of the things they're most inaccurate about. So as we move forward, that's something that we're going to look at doing. Tobacco use and smoking, again, has decreased at the middle school. Currently smoke cigarettes 0.5%, which is down again from 1 and 1.2%. Now, ever used an electronic vapor product, that's at 8.4%, which again, as we talked about before, is probably underreported. But the Middlesex League is 8.8. In 2017, that was 14.7%. Currently used an electronic vapor product, that's 3.9%, consistent with the Middlesex League average, and again, down from 2017. Again, putting those 6th graders in this, though, is going to make these numbers a little bit skewed. Alcohol and other drugs. Ever drank alcohol, at least one drink. The MSMS said 10.6%, whereas the Middlesex League was 13.1, and in 2017 was 18.5, so those numbers have steadily decreased. Currently drank alcohol, 1.5%, down from 7.2 in 2017. So again, the balance between alcohol consumption, how that's gone down versus the increase in vaping, most students are going to probably choose one of those. And so ever used marijuana, 2%, down from 6.4% in 2017. During your life, how many times have you used a prescription drug not prescribed for them? 2.7%. And the Middlesex League, that's 2.2, and previously it was 2%. That number was also high in the high school, so we're also looking at how we can kind of make those adjustments curricularly about prescription medicine. Sexual behaviors are always reported very low. Ever had sexual intercourse is 1.7% for middle school, down from 4.4 in 2017. Did not use a condom during last sexual intercourse, and again, this is amongst the people who were sexually active, so 37.5% there. So out of that 1.7%, 37.5% did not use a condom during intercourse. Then nutrition and physical activity, did not eat breakfast at all during the 7 days before the survey. This was probably the most glaring one. 8.6% not eating at all during the 7 days before. That's really telling, especially for the earlier, middle school is starting at an earlier time where that food is going to really matter. I can make a few arguments about like when the high school about how having that later start time really allows kids to do that, take the time for that. But students also at this there is something to be said for the maturity and the relationship to how they take ownership over their own health. And so I think that's telling. Watch TV for 3 or more hours per day during the 7 days before the survey. That's 15.2% versus 24% in 2017 and 20.4% in 2016. So that number's gone down, even though it is higher than the Middlesex League average. And played video or computer games or used a computer for 3 or more hours per day. Again, in this description, it does talk about smartphones as being a part of that. So I do think that's one of the main reasons. For the middle school, that's 40%. And then describe themselves as slightly or very overweight. 25.5%, which is down from 27.5% in 2017, but again, a little higher than the Middlesex League average. So out of that, that's, again, a much more condensed version of the than of the high school version of the YRBS. So just a lot of similar recommendations here, so I'll only cover the ones, I'll reinforce some that we mentioned. To share the YRBS data in a similar fashion, again, to students also, and PTO meetings and faculty. This information is valuable for people to know. And I think in the past, we've done it to a certain extent, but we need to start expanding it. The YRBS guidebook is there. Implementing the school climate survey on those off years, again, should be recommended. This one was something that we talked about because it currently exists, but I think we need to build in more kind of avenues about the social components in terms of how they change. Is providing current 5th graders and 8th graders with programming regarding social emotional learning and transitioning to the next grade level. We do a day where we prepare students for what it is to go to the middle school and what it is for the high school. It's much more of a logistical day. You know, this is the bus you take. This is, you know, how this works, you know, in the high school compared to here. And I think there needs to be much more education about kind of the social changes that happen. Continue implementing the RCAD, specifically in grade 6, which is how it affects the middle school here. Again, advocating for school adjustment counselor at the middle school because those positions are going to become more and more frequent in schools. There was also discussion of kind of an overarching mental health coordinator, if that's something that we might want to consider moving forward, because now there's just more and more being added to this realm, and again, developing some organization with that is important. The next one is to advocate for an additional health education staff at the elementary level. We had this position proposed a couple of years ago, and due to staffing concerns, it didn't come to fruition. But this is something that I think is going to be necessary as we move forward. Now, obviously, I have a stake in the race, but I think it's important to understand that with a lot of these health questions and issues that are hitting kids earlier and earlier, you know, we've kind of left it on classroom teachers and on small in-services to adjust this. And part of the message comes down to consistency in the message and how frequently students are hearing it. I can tell you firsthand, I teach puberty to all the 5th graders, and one puberty lesson is adequate. There could be more, you know, and when we talk about puberty, we're talking about the physical changes that are going on, and we do very little outside of the mental emotional part. We do very little outside of the social changes that are happening. We don't really have the opportunity to get into healthy relationships and what that means. When we're talking relationships, we're talking about friends and peers, not necessarily, you know, partners. And so I think looking forward, it's something that we need to reassess and potentially try and push for again, because there's so much that needs to go on at those levels that, you know, I thank the classroom teachers for doing their best to address it, but to have a consistent message with a consistent curriculum would be very beneficial for that age group. We also think about how much of a burden that shifts off of 6th grade health. 6th grade health is really the first health class they're having, and so it's a lot and it's dense. And so now, instead of trying to cover everything that needs to be included, you can cover things that are more, I don't want to say age appropriate, but that are more flowing with what it is to be a 6th grader, instead of trying to create this encompassing curriculum that's going to cover K through 5. And so it's really something I think we need to look at. Additionally, in talking to Ms. Purchase, this is something that she thinks is important. Utilization of the school breakfast program at the middle school. Again, there was that high number of kids who haven't eaten breakfast in the last 7 days, but also with that earlier start time, with the demands of getting to school in the morning. I mean, I know just getting my own kids to school, there's times where we're all a little stressed in the morning, and as I'm sure you know, it can be a challenge in the morning. But we also know how important that meal is, just in terms of being able to function in the classroom and being able to, you know, mentally be prepared for learning. Next two are again, consistent with what we've talked about in the past. in the other recommendations, provide staff with PD focused on mental health awareness with the possibility of a review and audit of how the middle school handles mental health issues and what they do with those kids. And then continuing to implement the YRBS moving forward to continue on the same cycle, because the information that we're getting from this and the data has been very valuable with shaping our curriculum and kind of our programming. So I know that was pretty intense, and again, I'm sorry to move through it fast, but I understand everyone's got their time issues. I want to just thank everyone for their time and going through this content. I know it's a lot, but I do think that kind of the recommendations we draw out of this are really important in looking at how we approach these issues as a district, and again, trying to address them proactively. And looking forward to it, that's one of the things that our focus has been really on the last year, is what we can do more out ahead of these issues. And so some of the programs that school committee has helped with in the past, looking at our previous recommendations, our main recommendation from the last year was to develop an advisory program, and that's being implemented next year at the high school. So that's been through the support of school committee, so we appreciate that. And looking forward, we're hopeful that we can take similar steps to follow up with some of these recommendations.
I just want to, again, thank you, because there's a huge amount of data, and I've had the data for a couple of months now while the subcommittees have been working on your report, and it's really overwhelming. So I'm very appreciative of what you've done and brought to us so that we can share that information. Are there people who'd like to make comments? Yeah.
Just a quick comment, and I want to thank Matt. That was a great job. Sitting here listening to the presentation, and it obviously went on for a while, but you clearly have a good handle on what's in the report, ways to address it, and you could feel the commitment that you have and the importance that you put into this. So as a parent and as a school committee member, I really appreciated that.
Thank you.
It was a wonderful presentation. The one thing, we've always obviously been looking at these now for a few years since we started doing it a few years back. And, you always wonder, kids taking questionnaires like this, how do they treat it seriously? Is it, can you trust the numbers? Because frankly, over the course of time, some of the numbers have been startling. And, but the thing that struck me in looking at this, and I like the presentation because we see previous years plus the league plus the state, everything's right within a couple of points of each other. So it's not like they're all over the lot. So any idea or any concern that kids are fudging it one way or the other, over-reporting or under-reporting, they're either all doing it in the same towns, or it's or the numbers are accurate, and I think they're probably accurate. And if the numbers are accurate, there's clearly, and depending on the subject matter and the area, but there is clearly issues and problems out there that need to be addressed. And I think you're doing a nice job of trying to do that. But again, as a parent, as a school committee person, it's eye-opening, and it's something that I think people have to be aware of, and we use those numbers moving forward. So, again, thank you for the presentation. It was outstanding, and we'll keep working at it.
Yes, Mrs. Monaco?
Yeah, I agree with everything Tom said as far as you did a great job. And some of these numbers are startling, and some of them are upsetting. But I like the fact that you were so direct with them and that you're working on solutions to the problems. Just to reiterate, I would like to see more information to parents about the dangers of vaping. I would like to see the students trained on how to help each other. And one last thing that is not a part of this that kind of popped into my head, I guess it doesn't really fit in this particular survey, but I worry about kids that may be suffering from some sort of abuse outside of school, perhaps at home, and it doesn't show up in this. But I hope there's a way for those students to find someone to share their problems with. But again, great job.
Our hope is kind of with the development of the school climate surveys, to maybe find questions like that that have a tough fit into some of the content that we
Yeah.
provide here and address those that way.
Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, just real quick, I know it's getting late in the evening. I share Christine's and Tom's comments. We've been seeing these surveys now for many years, and it's impressive. 10, I was going to say that, but I wasn't sure if it was 10 or more. When we first started seeing some of these results, they were shocking and alarming. And as Tom said, they're probably fairly accurate, although there may be some underreporting going on in the middle school. But it's nice to see that so much time and attention and thought is going into trying to address what's in these reports. Originally, it was like, what are we going to do? And now we can see through your leadership, Matt, that there's a lot of thought being put into how to address the concerns. I just wanted to thank you for the hard work you're doing, and it was a great report.
Mrs. Russo?
My question might not necessarily be for you, but the administration. The different positions that you've requested or suggested here, are they in our draft budget that we just got? So they're all in there, so we'll have the chance of seeing the budget with these positions in there. Okay, thank you. Again, amazing job. I had the pleasure of working closely with Matt and watching him come on board and really take so much of this data that has gone through many different changes and ways in which of implementing, and I can't speak enough to your leadership and your way of handling this, and the group of people who are working, Joe Abba, Christine Shurin, Susan Fay, Amy, thank you. There's just, they are such a caring group of people, and I can't say enough for it. We'll look at a percentage, it's 2%, and most people will be like, oh, great, we don't have to really worry about that category, 2%, and someone says, that's 12 kids. You know, we have 12 kids right now contemplating hurting themselves, and really, you know, keeping it in perspective, keeping it professional, and really over the years changing and updating the curriculum and moving it in ways to try and be preemptive, which is hard to do with children. You don't know what's coming next, but at the same point, really reacting in appropriate manners and really addressing all the concerns. And I can't speak enough for the level of professionalism for this group. And I also want to thank Dr. Conti, because there were different times of talking, is this meaningful, is this needed, and really bringing the whole Middlesex League together to give us this data, which has given us so much more pertinent information, comparing it to the Middlesex League. We were looking at the state, and at one point it was more Western Mass towns. So I can't thank Dr. Conti enough for your effort in really working with the superintendents, showing how important this is, and then with Leahy and their ability to help move this along with the payment, with the organization. So, I mean, it's really been an effort on many people, and as Mrs. Bonco mentioned, you know, really back at the children, making them more caring and making them healthier. If we have healthy children, we can teach them. We need healthy, happy children before we can get to those academics. So I was long-winded, but I don't think people understand how much has gone into it and how many people really have worked hard, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because just to reflect on the context that the Middlesex League numbers give us is the key to all this. You know, because if we just go through our own mental health numbers, that it's alarming, it's scary, but the context that those other numbers give us a little bit of measure to understanding kind of what's real about it, and making sure that, one, when we see deficiencies, you know, maybe that's what about our community is leading to this. If we see areas we have an advantage, what does that mean for us? You know, and so without those additional numbers, without that greater group, we'd really be struggling. So again, thank you for that. And then also just mentioning the subcommittee, the people who do that, that's where most of the work gets done, and that's, I'm so lucky to have people who are willing to share that burden, because it's all people who are in it for the right reasons and understanding like this is valuable data that matters in the classroom, it matters programming, it matters administratively, and so to have people from each level on that be a part of it is really kind of what makes it work. So.
And it matters when you walk outside of Burlington into the community and you see these children in a Dunkin' Donuts or in Papagino's, or you see them out on the field. It matters outside of our campuses, and that there's our community, and what you're doing helps just that next further into the community.
Yes, I'm not going to repeat all the gratitude that we have for the work you and the committee have done. I do have, I had come here, we had a little conversation earlier because I've been on the wellness committee with you, and you had I had asked you what you felt, given the results of this year's YRBS, what you felt the areas of focus should be. And you had told me you thought vaping and sleep issues and dietary issues. And I'm just wondering if you had any last comments on any of those. I mean, clearly you've addressed them, there are recommendations. So if you have any further comment.
Yeah, I think just kind of culmination of this, kind of addressing what Ms. Russo said, our students we see the academic part as being such a headliner for who they are. And when in their eyes, that's like not much of who they are, And so when we think about the behaviors they're doing, the ownership they take over themselves, in terms of their well-being, in terms of their overall health, like that's kind of, and through our eyes, the part that we need to address, because when students have those other parts lined up, the academics, it's a lot easier, And when it comes to all those small things that they do to help themselves, whether it's dietary, whether it's physical activity, like that's the recipe to get to that point where they can be successful in the classroom. So without those things, it really becomes ignorance. And when students are aware of that, it's amazing because they really start to take that step ownership of it, and they say, all right, I know I can do more to prepare myself. But when they're kind of oblivious to that, or we're not reinforcing it consistently enough, you can see like those cracks in the foundation, whether or not they're prepared to learn or whether or not they're prepared to excel. And so I think some of those smaller things like vaping and dietary behaviors and physical activity really play a role in the foundation of who these kids are as students. And it tends to be overlooked, and I get why. It's not a criticism, it's just a reality. We're here for the growth of the person and the growth of the student, and the academic takes, preference over that. But it is part of that whole student. And so this kind of, I think, reminds us all who we're dealing with, and how the academics is so impacted by those other things.
Thank you. Dr. Conti?
Yeah, Madam Chair, and again, I understand time is of the essence, but just a few things of context for the committee, and we've talked about this before. Research is pretty clear. What correlates more to student success or student choices when they get to be adults it's more highly correlated to their social emotional health and growth as opposed to their academic performance. So this work is critical. It's critical anyway, but I'm saying if you need a research base to do that, it would be kids who have the most social emotional growth, that we're attending to their social emotional needs, are by some measures of success, the most successful as adults. So it's just critical work that we're doing. Undoubtedly, at town meeting, we're going to get the question that your enrollment has stayed relatively steady. I know it's climbing gradually. Why do you continue to need additional positions? And we're seeing additional needs in our kids, and their needs that we might not have faced as children coming up. And why that is, I'm sure you all have your theories for that. All I can tell you is that it's reality. Our teachers from preschool to 12, I think, are dealing with more students who are anxious. They're dealing with more behaviors. We're having to work with the kids, but also we can't also forget that we have to make sure our professionals are their social emotional needs are being addressed, and because they're the ones who have to do this with the kids. Again, I think Matt's work here is clear. You may have questioned, we took the YRBS last spring, why are you just hearing about it now? They've been working with the data, so it's not like we've waited till now to make these changes. I think you've been working with the data all along, probably from the summer forward. This is just when we had a break in the schedule to do that, and the presentation was done. So we're not waiting, but we're doing this. I think that, Thomas Murphy, to your point, I would consider this an accurate survey, but not a precise survey. So again, over time, the accuracy is going to get better. Given our peer group, I think you can see there's some accuracy to this, but it may not be, I'm not sure there's a statistical significance to 0.1%. So it may not be precise, but I think in general, we're getting a good idea of what we're doing. Leahy contributed $50,000, so this is not a short investment for them. So I just, again, want to make sure that the Leahy Group and the Leahy Board is, we thank them. We've done that all formally, but just so everyone in the community knows, Leahy, again, put out $50,000 for this survey across the Middlesex League, so across the 11 communities that participate in it. That was a significant investment. They are clearly committed to community health, because that's what this is a part of. Some of the recommendations I just think we just have to do. In a community like Burlington, we need to offer breakfast at the middle school. So that's going to put us more in deficit. I get that, but there's no reason for us not to offer breakfast at the middle school. And I just think we need to do that and make it work. So I think that's some of what I wanted to say. Matt, again, I've been reading that students might be, physical puberty may be actually occurring earlier in their lives. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
again, I don't know the reasons, sunspots, pollution, hormones in milk, right? A lot of the theories. But it's those changes that are happening earlier in a child's age. So I think we need to make sure that we're adjusting that. That gets to your elementary point.
Everything is.
And I'll stop here, but I know this took a lot of time. I know it took your attention. This is critical, a critical part of what we do. And I can go on, again, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff. Learning takes place when kids enjoy their learning, but when there are positive relationships with the adults that they're learning from. And this is all connected to that. The world is much more complex than when we were going through this. And what's the, Fred Astaire's partner said what I had to do everything Fred did, but backwards and in high heels, right? So our kids are doing everything we did, but they're doing it backwards in high heels, given the more complexity that they're dealing with. And I just always imagine growing up, if there was a cell phone with a camera, potentially filming what I did, or the decisions I made, those are high stakes, and those don't go away for kids. So the decisions they make, their social emotional health, these are high stakes. And so we're going to be talking about new positions. I know people sort of get upset and they say, I didn't have that when I was a kid. I get that. I'll tolerate that to a point, but I'm not going to tolerate it too far, because we have to support our kids, and this community does a great job of it. And their mental health is as critical or more critical than their academic performance as they move forward. So I'll get off my soapbox, but Matt, thank you very much. It's a lot of work, and there's a tremendous amount happening in our schools that is due to the efforts of our teachers, our administrators, and they are truly addressing the needs of all the needs of kids as they are moving forward. So thank you for your patience, and I know we took a lot of your time and energy.
We're going to also, I believe there's a comment, Mrs. Creedon, if you want to comment.
When it comes to addressing the new positions, I'd be interested in to see what services the Community Life Center, the Family Life Center that we pay like all this money to, what they have to offer, as well as the resource police officer. So when it comes time to discuss that, if we could just have that information, that would be great.
Yeah, that's no problem. I mean, I can tell you right now that we do send a lot of our counseling through Burlington Youth Family Services. They do have open appointments for our students now, and they actually take some of that caseload right now. One of the issues when talking to our school counseling committee, staff, is that they hold X amount of slots open for us, and there's some insurance issues about what qualifies and what doesn't. So, but I'll look into that just to have a more precise answer.
Specifically, I'm envision them coming into the school to help with some of that.
I can actually address that, because I'm on the board of the Youth and Family Services Organization, and we do have staff from the Burlington Youth and Family Services serving students as doing counseling at Burlington High School. We also have the director, Christine Truhand, who's working with the middle school and is interested in doing more. So there is a lot of support, as well as that the staff at the high school is referring kids to the Youth and Family Services. And that's kind of, I think, fits into what you called the tier 1. Kids who need that individual one-on-one, often for issues that are not as directly school-related, perhaps, or some, I don't know exactly what the referral criteria are, but there is a lot of support from Burlington Youth and Family Services. We share across town this new service that's going to start in the summer, interface with referrals. So there is a lot of support with resources from there to us and referrals from us to them and that kind of thing. So we can talk about it more when it comes up in the budget as well.
I'd specifically, because I look at their budget very closely, so I'd specifically like to see them offer more services.
I think they'd like to.
In addition to, supporting appropriate staff, but
Yeah.
I think.
They're also full. They don't have any more openings. They don't have a wait list right now, but it's only halfway through their budget year, so. Okay, thank you so much for your time tonight, as well as all the time you did putting this together.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to move that, because we have Ways and Means here, that we take a couple of items out of order. First, I would move that we take item 5A next, and following item 5A, that we take item 7A.
Wait, items, tell me which item? The
Item
athletic?
5B, excuse me,
Okay.
the monthly financial update, and then after that we take item 7A, the 21 draft budget overview, and then see where we are after those two items in terms
Okay.
of potentially deferring some of the other items to our next meeting.
Okay,
Second.
we have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, 500. So we will now move to our communication regarding the monthly financial update. And Dr. Conti or Ms. Kasha? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think
Did you folks
did
get
you all receive
a
it? You have
report?
not received it?
You did not.
Um, Okay, that's, do you have the budgets? Why don't can we go on to the budget, and then I'll get you copies of the monthly financials, so we can do that? Yes.
All right. So we are going to postpone the monthly financial update and go to item new business 7A. I want to thank you, Nicole, for all the work you've done, and I know all of the principals and buildings and everyone has also done a lot of work to prepare for this. It's a huge document, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of decisions that we'll have to be making in the next few months as we go forward. While we're getting it up on the screen here, I just want to remind the public that these are open meetings, that we are going to have this public discussion of our fiscal '21 budget for the next couple of months, including every one of our regularly scheduled meetings will have a part of the budget discussed. We are also having a special budget session on March 2nd, which is a Monday night. Normally, our meetings are on Tuesday nights, but it's a Monday, March 2nd that week because of the voting on March 3rd. At each different monthly meeting, we'll be discussing different parts, but tonight is the overview that Ms. Kasha is going to present, and we can talk about. So, are you ready? Good, thank you.
Okay, so earlier today, you all received the draft budget document. So I was just going to walk through sort of the format.
Email today.
So on pages 1 and 2, it's basically the summary. It's the same format as the monthly financial reports. So you should be pretty familiar with all of the categories and the layout here. Page 1 is the salaries. On page 3, it sort of goes into a little bit more detail about the draft budget and the numbers that you see on pages 1 and 2. In this, in the total that you see on page 2, it includes all of the new position requests, all lane and column changes for next year. What is not included is the cost of unsettled contracts, which are BEA, Unit A, D, Burlington IAs, and clerical. So any increase in costs are not included on page 2. Basically, we wanted to be respectful of the bargaining process, so we didn't want to make any assumptions and include that there. So because of that, we still sort of needed to give a figure here so that just solely for the purpose of giving the committee an idea of financially where we stand during this process. So you'll see on
Just to make sure I understand,
Yeah.
are you saying that the salary budget was level funded for those, or did you assume just the same increase as last year, or?
there were no assumptions for increases for those.
So it's level funded from last year?
It's based off this current year's rates, but any lane changes, column adjustments are accounted for, just not.
Okay, so it is including that part. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
So on page 3, you'll see that there is a number put in there, but just sort of to show really where we might end up with all of these additions and new requests for positions and elsewhere in the operating budget. On pages 4 through 7, there's a list of new position requests. And it also includes the rationales that were submitted by the building principals or department heads that requested the positions. On page 8, this is something, new to us. Actually, Mr. Eiler had requested year-over-year comparisons. So on page 8, you'll see those for the expense side, which will help sort of see where you might want to drill down and where there were requests for increases on the expense side of budget requests. For all of the salaries in the detail of the budget, anything that's highlighted in blue is a new request for this year. It notes it in the text of it that it's a new position request. And the yellows are grant funded, so you won't see any total in the far right columns for those. Then for sort of ease of access, because most of you are working electronically on these, I did link the budget document. So on page 1, where there is the list of the salaries, if you click that blue box down the bottom, it'll bring you to the building-based salaries. And then on page 2, where the expenses are, if you actually click just the name of the department that you are wanting to look at, it will actually take you right there. So for instance, if I click high school, it takes us right to the high school summary page with the detailed backup. And then this box on the top right brings you back to that summary page, so you don't have to flip through everything. So.
Okay. All right. So, are there questions about the format? No. I was wondering if, I don't know if Dr. Conti, we're still figuring out how to get access to it. Hold on. So, Dr. Conti, would you like to
Yes.
comment?
I'm sorry, let me,
That's all right.
just get a little comfortable with the format here. And essentially, I think page 3, if you can get to page 3, is sort of the snapshot in time that we have. So again, remember, you all are going to see the sausage made. So in asking people what they need, Matt gave you a sample today. There are 22, basically FTE, 22 new positions that people have requested. And so Nicole has accounted for those new positions and then any operational costs and any known costs that we have. And again, as she stated, respectful of the bargaining process, we still have 4 contracts that we are bargaining. Obviously, those dollar amounts aren't settled. Just to give the school committee a sort of a general placeholder, we just had to build something in, and we're roughly at, given the 22 new positions, some money for settlement, again, knowing that bargaining still has to take place. The operational costs that we have, we came in at 6.14. So again, that should be not necessarily a shocking number to everyone, given where we've come in the past. And the work from now moving forward is basically going to be looking at those numbers and then having the school committee, again, we'll be making recommendations to bring the operating budget down. We'll also be then trying to finish up negotiations with the 4 bargaining units that are still outstanding. So we're going to have to do a couple things at once as we move forward, but I'm sure we can do that. The focus of the conversations from the budgeting perspective, I believe is really going to be on people from the cost centers and talking about their programming and their needs. Again, I think the negotiations will take place themselves, but I think our conversation should really focus on what people are needing, and I think the justification for the new positions that they've put forward. I'm sorry.
Yes, Mrs. Monaco, did you have a question? Oh, Mr. Murphy. Mhm.
How are we going to, in the event that all of our negotiations with the various unions are not complete by the time we have to finalize this document, which is generally the end of March, beginning of April, at that point, we're taking a guesstimate, I guess, as to what our bottom line has to be in order to pay the people that are currently working for us. And I guess it's something to keep an eye on. Maybe we don't have an answer now, but there is a possibility that we're going to get to the end of March and not know that number yet, that number being whatever negotiated settlements are. And we will have to, as we move forward and discuss this, keep that in mind and have some sort of a plan in place as to how to deal with that come town meeting or thereafter. If some of these if some of these contracts aren't settled until after we close out this document discussion, the budget discussion, could be even after the town meeting, depending on how things go. That's happened before. And we're going to have to, like I said, just give some thought, keep in the back of our mind as we move forward what our contingency plan is or how we're going to handle that. Because if negotiations come in at a higher number than we might have guesstimated when we put this number together, then we're going to be in a situation. So I just kind of throw it out there. It's something that we should keep an eye on as we move forward here, depending on the status of negotiations and the various union contracts. This might be kind of an open-ended bottom line, and it might or might not be determined by the time we get to town meeting.
Again, through the chair, Mr. Murphy, again, I'd agree, and that's why I'm sort of asking to sort of partition it in your head, even though it's not really partitioned. I think what's in front of us now are the sort of the operations and programming that we have to prepare for the kids, and I think that's what we should discuss in the positions. I think we have bargaining to do, and I think that's the process, and that's respectful. And but I think that we have to prepare the staffing and academic programming that our kids need, and then we'll again, we have to bargain, so we'll take the bargaining into consideration, and I'm optimistic. I hope we can get everything done, and but again, what I don't want to do is have the programming or anything else that we have to do hang in the balance. So I think we just have to move forward, and I think we've explained that enough times. And I think it's not anything we're in complete control of. So I think everyone understands that.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Nelson?
Dr. Conti, in these new positions that are proposed in this draft budget, I saw a .2, I think, as I'm scrolling through here for an assistant principal at Pine Glen. Are there any other assistant principals in the budget?
No.
So we got Marshall Simons and Fox Hill without an assistant, right?
Again, Marshall
Not
Simons.
Marshall Simons, excuse me.
We added last year. Fox
We have
Hill, no.
Memorial, no?
But I think Fox Hill added some other, a math
added
specialist
a
instead.
guidance or
So,
something,
well,
right.
they added guidance last year.
Yeah.
I think he was given a choice. I think he chose a math specialist over another position. So, again, we didn't restrict anybody. So I think they wanted the opportunity to come in, and I think some of the positions, again, the positions I look through, I don't think there's any superfluous position. Ms. Harrigan, you and I go through that every year. I don't think anyone is asking for anything that they don't need or couldn't use. And I'd say this year is the same, Mr. Nelson. But I think they want the opportunity to come in and speak to the committee about what that need
Okay.
is.
Okay. Other questions, Mrs. Russo? No? I guess, does it make sense for you to go through the new requested positions tonight, or is that something we should perhaps do when people come to speak? What do you recommend?
Again, just for time's sake, I think I can certainly go through them, but they're all listed, they're
Yeah.
detailed, and I think that you're gonna hear them again when
Okay.
folks come in, and they'll make their case. I think Nicole's done a great job. They're listed by school, position, what the cost is, and the rationale is listed, so you can familiarize yourself with that, and maybe get some questions. And I think, again, Nicole has even broken out for you the budget without any new positions, and then with the new position requests, again, on page 3. There basically is about $1.33 million of new positions requested for fiscal '21. So I think that's, we tried to present this to you in a number of ways. Really doesn't make sense, I think, for us to go through every single position now, because I think that would be stealing some of the
Yeah.
the
No,
thunder
not needed.
that people wanted to come in and present to you. Again, if you see any questions going through this, and Ways and Means as well, send us an email, and we'll make sure if you want to get extra information or a comparison, or, I would say a large percentage of these positions you've seen before in terms of prior budgets and prior requests, is my guess, but at least I felt that way.
Okay. So, is there anyone who'd like to ask a question or make a comment on this you're delivering the draft budget with all the requests in it tonight? It is a 6.14, I think you said, % increase over last year's request, but the idea is that we're going to go through this, and we're going to see, as we try to cut things out, that, you know, we would like to have everything. I think, I only looked at it briefly. I'd like us to be able to add all those positions, but we know that we're not going to be able to, so we're going to have to look and see what the priorities are. We're going to count on our staff and Dr. Conti to give us their ideas of priorities as well. But for tonight, does anyone have any other questions on the document that we just got? No. Okay. So we will then move on to communication number 5B on the agenda of the monthly financial update from Ms. Kasha. Thank you.
Again,
Dr. Conti?
thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I should have sent you those. That was my responsibility. Hopefully you have them now, and they're familiar. The format is familiar to you. Again, it's the 4 pages that we've gone through in the past. Thanks, Bob, I have it. So, page 1 is the revolving account. Again, the revolving accounts are all in the positive. The school lunch is not. Oh, back to me, thank you. And again, we can address the amount of that negative. We understand we have to close out that negative at the end of the financial year, and I think at some point with the committee, if we're going to be adding breakfast programs and making sure kids are getting food, that you're going to need to tolerate some negativity in the school lunch program. So we're doing an analysis this year on school lunch prices. Typically, if we raise prices, we lower participation, and then it comes back. There's no magic to this. It costs money to feed kids, and so I think at some point we just need to figure out how much of a tolerance everybody has for how much feeding we're going to do. So that's, so go ahead,
Mr.
Mr.
Nelson.
Quick question for Dr. Conti or Nicole. Can we use our school choice money to offset the feeding of the children here at the high school?
We can, and we've done that at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But honestly, we use the school choice for a lot of other things too. So I think we just need to talk about that. And again, to me, I
I mean,
understand.
that deficit is across the whole system. It's not
Yeah,
just the high school.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and right, and it's going to cost money to feed the kids. I think we
Yeah.
just have to decide where that money falls. If anyone believes that we can completely sustain the cafeteria program by what we charge for lunch, I'm hoping that you're recognizing that that's not a reality. I think that's a great aspiration, but it's just not going to happen. So the more we feed kids, and again, my priority is to feed the kids, we're going to have to deal with some deficit and probably offset more of that in the operating budget. I just think. How much we do that, I think we can discuss, but our commitment to town is not let that negative deficit carry over from year to year. So we have to close it out. Could we close it out in a town omnibus? We could, there are a lot of different ways we could do that, but I think the priority should be feeding the kids. My
Mr.
priority.
Nelson had a follow-up
Just one
question.
follow-up. Is there any line item in this new budget that we just received today to subsidize that account?
No.
Okay.
Mrs. Russo, you had a question or comment?
The breakfast at the high school, do we know if breakfast is a different type of animal than lunch per se? Does breakfast make money, break even, or is it also compared to lunch? Since we're looking at the middle school, too. Okay.
We can do some work on that
Yeah,
to figure out
just-
what the breakfasts, how the breakfasts run, and I think obviously the food is less expensive, but I think people still need to be there to prepare it.
Right, yep, I'm just curious. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Monaco?
I hate to be overly simplistic, but we need to put money in the budget for the cafeteria. It will pay the bills that need to be paid, and we shouldn't be running in a deficit all the time. We're just pretending that it's going to cover, and it isn't. So
We will,
you need to cover the breakfast program, and you need to cover the deficit, and it needs to be in the budget, and we don't need to rob Peter to pay Paul. It needs to come out of the budget, and yes, the guideline is not high enough.
Okay. Mrs. Creedon?
I do agree with putting cost into the budget for feeding these kids. I think we need to see how much, first of all, we charge, And then I want to see what it actually is costing, because we fight with this every single year. And especially if you're going to increase into the breakfast, we should see breakfast versus the lunch as well.
Okay.
So if you could work on that, that would be great.
Mr. Eiler?
Thank you. Just in terms of getting an electronic copy, can you send this electronically to us, just so we have that? Thank you. And also, in terms of the update on the budget, it looks like things are relatively constant from last
Okay,
month.
can we, actually, I'd just like to say, is there any other questions on the revolving
Yep,
funds?
that's exactly what I was going to ask.
Oh, about revolving funds?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, and then on the revolving, however, there was two things, and again, I apologize, just looking at very quickly here. Two things stood out. There's 3978, the Sprouts Daycare increased by 18K since last month, and perhaps related, the very last one, BHS Child Development, looks like a new revolving account and has 17K in it already. So could you just explain those two, please?
Yes, Ms. Kasha.
So on the last one on the list, the child development one, that was approved at the last school committee meeting. It currently lived in student activities, and it was one of the suggestions of the auditors that it needed to be a revolving fund. So that's been voted by the committee, and that's why you see the new.
Which is fine.
the new account there.
It's not connected to Sprouts.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It is not connected to
It is not,
Sprouts.
okay. And so where'd the 17K come from so quickly on that then?
Which line?
At the very last.
Which column, I mean, are you?
I'm looking at the ending balance, the 17,278.
Child development last one, it was the money identified.
Oh, that was the money that was in the student activities, it was transferred over.
Okay, so that's a transfer.
Okay, yes.
All right. And then there was the Sprouts question that increased by 18K since last month. Is that surprising, or seems surprising, I guess?
Just the ending balance, you're saying?
Yeah, the ending balance is 18K higher than last month.
I think, so this one, I think the way that the pay periods fell with this and the check that gets cut from the deductions and then redeposited into the account was captured under the receipts received but not yet posted. And I
Okay.
think usually that's lagging.
Maybe a better question for me to ask is, what's the rough run rate per month on that, would you say?
In expenses?
Yeah, just roughly.
I don't have that in front of me right now.
Is
but-
it essentially, I'm assuming the 187K was spent over like 4 months or so? Is that the right way to look at that?
I don't have the rest of the historical data in front of me right now. so-
No, I'm just looking at the expenditures of 187K. That's since September, presumably, right?
187K?
Is that right, or?
Yeah, that's what
Are you looking at the January 31st, 2020?
Yes, I'm sorry,
report?
I'm looking at two different things simultaneously here. So, sure, 236K is the expenditures since September, I assume? So that would be September, October, November, December, roughly 5 months?
Since July 1.
Okay, is there money spent during the summer on that, or?
There might be, I don't know, if they order something or anything
Okay.
after 7/1.
All right, well,
It should be
I'm
captured
just
then.
sort of approximating. It looks like it might be 40K a month, so maybe 18K could be variations in a couple weeks here and there. So, okay, thanks.
Again, just the intention of the program, and we can get you the run rate on that, is that that's a self-funding program, so.
And I just wanted to comment again on the school lunch. It is at a deficit this month, but there was an issue about December being a month where there's not a lot of school dates, and the state reimbursements not being funded. So with that number there, do you feel that it's indicating a significant deficit this far in the year, or not just this month? But other months, you've said that you were not concerned because, so do you have a sense of that, Nicole?
So this ending balance reflects all of reimbursements received through the month of December.
Right.
So it doesn't have January's on here.
Okay. So I guess I'm glad to hear that there's I don't know who's doing it, but someone's doing an analysis of the costs and the income, and so that we can make some decisions, because, I think we need to look at, what the balance is between the costs and the expenses. And I think that I'm willing for us to subsidize, as we have some years, but I also feel we should look at prices. I also support looking at this breakfast program. And I'd like that, all those things that were mentioned earlier, to be reported back to us so we can make a decision. But I don't want to look at that particular number this particular month and say, oh, we're going to be way in deficit, we need to put money in the budget for that. I feel like we need to know more about the school year expenses versus income kind of thing. Okay? Thank you. All right. Any more revolving fund?
Can I just make one more?
Oh,
comment
sure,
on that?
yeah.
Aside from maybe just taking a look at just rates, we could also maybe explore some other options of maybe increasing participation. That might help.
Okay. Good. Yes, all that discussion will be good. Thank you. Okay. So now, on the next pages, if people have any comments or questions on page 2, which is the operating budget for personnel, I believe, that page 2. Any questions on that? Okay. On page 3, which is the operations and maintenance part of our operating budget, are there any questions on that? Okay. I had a question. Partly it's my learning how to read these reports, and I keep thinking I got it, and then I'm not sure. On page 2, it's clear to me how much money is left in the budget for total school personnel. It's close to $1 million. And here it says that the operations and maintenance, there's nothing in that line. Does that mean that we have projected to spend exactly what's in the budget for this year for the operations and maintenance?
Yes, so
Okay.
column 1 shows the budget, column 2 shows what's spent and encumbered, and then the projected basically shows the assumption that everyone would fully spend their budget.
So
and
that little
the rest
dash
of-
is like a 0, is
Yes.
all I'm checking. Thank you. Good. I did understand it. All right. And then the last page is the accommodated account. Any questions on that this month? No. Okay. Any comments from you about financials? Okay. Dr. Conti?
No, again, I'm gonna get the question, am I relieved, am I okay with the number? Not yet, it's still February, so, it's better than being in the red, so I
Yes.
think that's what I would say, and,
Okay. All right. So then I'd like to move on, going back to number 4, instruction technology. B is the elementary space needs, actually, I don't know if it's C, whatever. If there are any updates from Mr. Cuna on our process.
Thank you. So the RFQ, the request for qualifications, was submitted, and we expect that when we come back from school vacation on the Monday, the 24th, that is the deadline at 11 o'clock for all submissions to that. We have had some positive interest already, over 25 requests for
Wow.
the packets. I want to stay positive and hope that all 25 will submit their qualifications. I expect probably it'll be a little bit less than the full 25, but hopefully we'll grab some more. So, like I said, when we get back from school vacation, I'll probably need a few days to go through that, but then I'll make sure to share the results with the committee.
Okay. Any other questions on that?
Positive.
Okay, that's good to hear. I just wanted to comment because I've been concerned about, we had talked, Mr. Eiler had proposed a wonderful idea that we get some videos, which he calls Validate the Need. These two building projects, the elementary building project and the high school renovation project, how do we make the case that these are needed, and videos could be helpful. And Dr. Conti pointed out that once we have hired the firm to do the design and engineering and such with us, that can be part of what they do. They might be really good at it, and we might use them. And so I've been pushing behind the scenes on that, but I'm not so worried about it now that I understand there could be some professionals coming in who'd be able to help us with those kinds of things. But we hadn't talked about it in a while, and I wanted to mention that, so, okay. All right. So now we'll move on. And so the communication for the athletic field maintenance update. I understand we have some new information, but if there was a topic this topic could take a while, and I'm wondering if this is the topic we'd like to postpone for our next meeting, and
So moved.
so we can get.
Second.
Well, I don't think I can make. Moved, yes.
And I
okay.
second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The chair votes aye. So we will have the athletic field maintenance update and discussion at our next meeting. Thank you. The next item is old business. We have three policies that we might, these are all second readings. Am I correct on that, Sharon? Yeah, okay. So the first one is called Equal Educational Opportunities. The file letters are JB. And we had a little discussion last time about whether it's included everybody, and we wanted to add neurodiversity. So I'm going to read the first paragraph. We have added that in recognition of the diversified characteristics and needs of our students, and with the keen desire to be responsive to them, the school committee will make every effort to protect the dignity of the students as individuals. It will also offer careful consideration and sympathetic understanding of their personal feelings, particularly with reference to their race, color, sex, gender identity, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, homeless status, physical and intellectual differences, neurodiversity, pregnancy, or pregnancy-related condition. Some of those were added recently, in the last couple of years, legally. We felt it was important to specify neurodiversity as a category. This is just a general statement that we will address the needs of all of our students and give them all an equal education opportunity. Are there any questions or comments?
I move that we accept policy file JB with the new language, including the word neurodiversity.
Second.
And thank you to Beth for that word.
Yes. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The chair votes aye, so that's 4-0-0. Okay, the next one is educational opportunities for children in foster care, JFABF. Again, this is some new.
JFABE.
Well, we're doing foster care first. That was the next one on the packet, so we will do that one after. So JFABF is educational opportunities for children in foster care. This is trying to be sure that we are providing children who are in foster care the most stable education they can. I'll read you the first paragraph. The purpose of this policy is to ensure the educational stability of students in foster care. Educational stability has a lasting impact on students' academic achievement and well-being. And the school committee is committed to supporting all efforts to ensure that students in foster care have equal access to high-quality, stable educational experiences. It goes through some more of the specifics of what's required by law and that we will be guaranteeing in this policy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The chair votes aye. Okay, the next policy we're looking at tonight is JFABE, Educational Opportunities for Military Children. And the first paragraph says, to facilitate the placement, enrollment, graduation, data collection, and provision of special services for students because of their parents or guardians being on active duty in the U.S. Armed Services. The district believes it is appropriate to remove barriers to educational success imposed on children of military families resulting from frequent moves required by parents or guardians' military deployment. So we will support and implement our responsibilities in the various regulations and laws. Is there a
So moved.
motion? Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. That's 5-0-0. So that is our old business. And now under new business. We have out-of-state travel. Dr. Conti?
Madam Chair, Assistant Superintendent Larkin has submitted an out-of-state travel request for Fox Hill music teacher Margaret Harrigan to attend. The conference will be held in the Poconos or in Poconos, PA on April 23rd through 25th. And again, it'll be funded by the curriculum instruction budget. It's recommended school committee approve out-of-state travel for Margaret Harrigan to the Music Educators Association Annual Conference in Pennsylvania.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
Will they have heart-shaped bathtub?
She can't even ask a question.
The Poconos, you know, the heart-shaped bathtubs.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I like my parents' one.
Any further comments or questions?
My white crystal, my Fred Astaire reference
Uh-huh.
over there, is that?
Okay. All right.
Backwards and high heels.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? Chair votes aye. That's 5-0-0. Thank you. Dr. Conti, is that all the out-of-state travel we have
I
tonight?
believe so, yes.
Okay. So the next item is ratification of the 2020 to 2023 custodial union contract.
Again, Madam Chair, I'd like to just suggest we table this ratification vote. Darren submitted some vacation language that we just need to make sure that we are in agreement on. I will say that the custodial union and Bob had very productive meetings. We feel like we have again, have a memorandum of agreement where we're sort of felt it was a very positive and respectful, mutually respectful negotiation. As with all of our employee groups, really feel like the custodians do a fantastic job and are an important part of our providing an education. We just honestly want to make sure that they're aware of all the language changes. We feel they're insignificant, but didn't want to make the assumption that the change was insignificant until we talk to them. So it'll be ready for you next time. I just wanted to say this isn't a significant change. It's just some language changes on the vacation that we had agreed to, but we hadn't gotten them the actual language. We got it to them too late, so
Okay.
not in time for this meeting.
All right. And I believe the other, just as an update, we have ongoing negotiations with the Instructional Assistants Union, which was very positive last week. Are there others, we have other ones that are ongoing?
Yeah, they're all ongoing, they're all
Okay.
scheduled, and again,
Okay.
we're gonna make, we're making good progress, so
All right.
I think we'll go from there.
Okay. Yes,
I
Mrs.
believe cafeteria ratified today.
Okay.
So,
right.
again, we just
So-
were a little bit behind, but we'll get that all in your agenda at next meeting.
Great. Okay. So, is there anything else on the agenda before public participation is listed that I've missed? I just want to make sure we got it all. Okay. Is there anyone here for public participation on a topic that we did not have on the agenda? All right. Now, I believe we need to have we may or may not need an executive session.
We do not.
We do not need an executive session. Do we want to reconsider having the conversation about the athletic fields tonight, since we don't have executive session? I only don't need to bring it up again, but I wanted to put that out as a possibility because it's still before 10 o'clock. But no, nobody's interested. Okay. Therefore, I will take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those, this is in all those, right? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The chair votes aye. We are now adjourned. Thank you.